Welcome, fellow traveller, to the Sleepless Voyager, where history becomes a gentle sea. Tonight we set sail into a gentle camp with Livingstone in Africa. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to sit beside a fire in a land where the stars seem endless and the quiet is broken only by the crackle of wood and the hum of distant insects? Or how it might be to share the night with an explorer who scribbled notes under the glow of a lantern while the wilderness stretched into shadow? If these stories soothe you, you're welcome to like or subscribe, no pressure at all. Each message you leave is a lantern of its own along our voyage. Now, settle in, breathe deeply, and step into the hush of this night. If you drift into dreams, that is perfectly fine. The camp will keep watch for you. The night begins wide, a dome of stars stretched over an African plain. You're invited to step softly into it, as though your feet touch the dust of another century. Around you, the air holds both warmth and coolness, a paradox that only open lands know. The day's heat lingers in the soil, while a breeze lifts from the trees with a sigh of relief. The fire ahead, glowing steady in the clearing, is not just flame but signal. It says safety, companionship, the promise of voices telling stories before sleep. David Livingstone is there, though not in the posture of a stern explorer in paintings or statues. Here he sits quietly, shoulders curved with weariness, yet face softened by the calm of night. His journal lies across his lap, its leather cover worn from rain and dust, its pages crowded with notes and careful handwriting. He listens first before he writes, to the creak of the grass huts nearby, to the shuffle of his porters arranging mats, to the occasional bray of a donkey that still resists the idea of resting. The camp itself is a circle, not strict but natural, like the shape of comfort made visible. The fire is at its centre, and around it rise simple tents of canvas and hide, some patched, some sagging a little. Beyond the tents, shapes are bundled on the ground, blankets covering men already drifting into sleep. The smell is a blend, smoke rising from the fire, the resin of wood half burnt, the faint sweetness of maize that has been boiled earlier, and under it all the earthy scent of dust that never quite settles. When Livingstone clears his throat softly, it is not to lecture but to share. He tells you that many nights of travel end like this, with little ceremony, only a fire and a circle of tired souls. Sometimes the night holds music, sometimes silence, sometimes the voices of animals whose calls remind every traveller that the land is not empty. The sound tonight is a gentle chorus, insects weaving a constant thread, dogs barking now and then at shadows, and far away a bird that seems to cry out a single note over and over. You're encouraged to take your seat close to the warmth. The fire greets your face with heat, and you're back with cool night air so that your body feels divided between two worlds. Livingstone offers no speech about science or empire tonight, only small remarks. He remembers that salt carried in a small pouch has been worth more than coins on the road. He mentions the stars above, that he sometimes traced with his brass sextant, though tonight he lets them shine without measurement. He admits that when he was a boy in Scotland, he had no thought that one day he would sit here, under a different sky, sharing silence with strangers who became companions. The porters too add to the atmosphere. One hums softly, almost to himself, a tune that repeats without end. Another adjusts his blanket and mutters about a stone under his hip, drawing laughter from those nearby. These small sounds make the night less lonely, weaving the circle of camp with threads of humour and humanity. If you listen closely, you can hear the faint crack of a log giving way to embers. The sparks rise, brief stars of their own, and vanish into the air. You may imagine yourself reaching out with a stick, stirring the fire so that the glow shifts and deepens, revealing the orange heart within. Around you, the night accepts your presence. It does not push back but folds you into itself. Livingstone leans down to the journal on his lap. His pencil scratches slowly, pausing often, for he writes not only what he saw but what he felt: the weariness of the day's march, the relief of reaching water, the quiet satisfaction of this fire. He looks up sometimes and catches your eye, not with the distance of a great figure from history, but with the warmth of a man who knows that stories are best when shared gently, without urgency. This is the invitation of the first night, not to adventure in the usual sense, not to battles or conquest, but to companionship in the dark. To sit where maps once ended and voices began, to listen as the earth itself hums through insects and birds, to rest while fire holds the shadows at bay. And as you breathe slowly, letting your chest rise and fall, the campfire takes its place not only in Africa, but in your own memory. For every fire holds the same promise, whether in Scotland, Africa, or your own room tonight. That night is softer when flame flickers near, that silence is kinder when filled with small voices, that rest is possible when someone else is awake to watch the night. Close your eyes if you wish. The fire will still glow, the stars will still watch, Livingstone will still write, pausing often as though to wait for your dreams to begin. The night has grown deeper, and the fire that once flared bright has begun to soften into a steady glow. But before its warmth reaches you fully, imagine stepping back just a little to take in the land beyond the camp. Africa before the firelight feels different, almost larger, as though the flicker of flame shrinks the world to a circle, while the darkness expands it endlessly. The sky is a canvas without edges, painted with countless stars that are more than points of light. They are ancient companions, shining in patterns that Livingstone once traced in order to guide his steps. Tonight, however, you need not chart their courses. Instead, you only look upward, letting them appear as lanterns of eternity, glowing without demand, asking nothing from you but attention. The air carries layers of scent that shift with every small movement. There is the sharp tang of smoke, mingling with the earthy fragrance of dust pressed down by many feet. A sweet note comes from the grass still damp with the cool of evening, while somewhere nearby, perhaps just beyond the circle of light, wild herbs release their aroma as though stirred by unseen hands. The breeze carries the faint smell of animals too, donkeys tethered to posts, dogs that prowl nervously, and perhaps, if you imagine keenly, the musky scent of antelope moving through the grass at a distance. You pause in that space between the camp's warmth and the vastness beyond, and in that pause you realise the difference between then and now. Today, if you wish to see a wilderness at night, you might carry a flashlight, switch on a GPS, or check a phone that tells you exactly where you stand. In Livingstone's camp, none of those existed. The only guides were the stars, the memory of a path taken by day, and the instinct of those who had walked the land for generations. There is a gentle humility in this realization. It reminds you that the earth itself was once the only compass, and the sky the only map. As you stand, you hear the sounds that live just outside the circle of human life. Insects carry on with their endless chorus, weaving a tapestry of high-pitched notes that rise and fall like invisible waves. A night bird calls once, twice, and then falls silent, as though it knows it has been heard. From far away, a low roar stretches across the plain. A lion, perhaps, though softened by distance, so that it reaches your ear less as a threat, and more as a reminder of the wild kingdom that surrounds you. The dogs near the camp prick their ears, give a short bark, then settle down again, reassured by the fire and the company of humans. Livingstone notices you listening. He speaks quietly, not to disturb those already curled in their blankets, but enough for you to hear. He tells you that lions have always roared here, long before maps drew lines or names. He explains, in the simplest way, that porters believe such calls carry messages from ancestors, not just beasts of the night. He does not mock their view, nor insist on his own. Instead, he allows both truths to stand side by side, the natural and the spiritual, the explorer's observation and the guide's story. In this way, the camp becomes not only a place of rest, but a meeting point of the worlds. A young porter, perhaps no older than a boy just beginning manhood, comes closer to the fire with a quiet smile. He carries in his hands a gourd of water, lifting it to offer you a drink. The water tastes of earth and clay from the pot in which it has been kept cool. It is simple, refreshing, and more valuable than wine. As he sets the vessel down, he begins humming a tune. The melody is unfamiliar, yet it loops in such a way that soon you find yourself swaying slightly, as though your body recognizes the rhythm even if your ears do not. Livingstone writes of such songs in his journals, work songs, travel songs, lullabies that turned into night music. He admitted that while he could not understand the words, the feeling was always clear: comfort, belonging, and endurance. The young man finishes his tune and mutters something about spirits in the grass. Others laugh softly, teasing him in voices you cannot follow, yet the laughter itself needs no translation. It is the laughter of companions who find joy in teasing each other about fears everyone secretly shares. Livingstone smiles, scratching another line in his book. Perhaps tomorrow the boy's superstition will appear in the explorer's notes, though written with the calm of science. Yet tonight, at the edge of firelight, it is simply a human moment, one more thread in the fabric of the camp. As your gaze lifts again, the horizon reveals itself not as a line, but as a blur. The tall grasses sway in the breeze, their tops moving together like waves, silvered faintly by the starlight. Beyond them, the trees hold themselves tall and still, their leaves whispering occasionally, as though speaking to the wind. If you let your imagination drift, you might picture the land itself breathing. Inhale as the grasses bend, exhale as they rise again. In that breathing you find your own rhythm of rest, slow, steady, unhurried. You think of how different this moment is from the present day. When travellers now arrive in Africa, they might step into lodges with lanterns already lit, with meals prepared, with guides trained to explain every sound. Livingstone and his companions, however, knew a camp more fragile. Their tents leaked, their rations often spoiled, and their safety relied not on walls but on firelight and faith. Yet out of that fragility grew something stronger, a sense of closeness, not only with one another, but with the land itself. Perhaps that is why these nights mattered so much, and why they still carry weight in memory. The fire cracks again, and you return to its circle. Your seat is still warm, the log beneath you solid, the glow on your face steady. Livingstone closes his journal for the night, places it gently beside him, and lets his hands rest on his knees. The young porter curls into his blanket, the hum of his tune fading into breath. The dogs lie flat, ears twitching at small sounds, but they no longer bark. The camp has settled, and so can you. Let the firelight draw you back. Let the vastness of Africa beyond it fold into a background hum. You do not need to know every constellation or every name of tree and bird. It is enough to feel the air on your skin, to hear the chorus of insects, to see the embers rising and vanishing into the dark. This is Africa before the firelight, vast, unmeasured, yet close enough to touch through sound and scent. If you close your eyes now, you will not lose it. The night will remain, the stars will continue to glow. The camp will breathe in its circle. Rest is already here, waiting only for you to join it. The journey toward the camp begins long before the fire is lit, and if you picture it clearly, you may hear the rhythm of feet pressing into dry earth, a sound steady as a heartbeat. The sun has already slipped below the horizon, leaving only a faint smear of orange along the western sky, while the rest of the land folds into the muted blue of early night. The men walk in single file, their loads balanced on shoulders padded with cloth, every step a reminder of how far they have already come. Dust clings to their legs, and when the wind shifts, it lifts in small spirals, catching in the last light like smoke, before dissolving into the dark. Each porter carries something different, and together their burdens form a portrait of travel in the 19th century. One man has a bundle of canvas for tents, another balances a cooking pot that knocks against his back with each step, and another carries a box of instruments, its corners bound with rope, holding Livingstone's precious sextant and compass. There are bags of rice, a bundle of dried cassava, and even a small chest containing salt, its weight guarded carefully because in this land, salt is as precious as silver. A donkey lumbers at the rear, ears twitching at flies, its back laden with goods until it resembles more a walking mound of cloth than an animal. The path curves gently, leading them past tall grasses that rise higher than their waists. The grass whispers when the wind slides through it, creating the illusion of countless voices speaking at once, each saying something just beyond the reach of comprehension. Somewhere in the distance, frogs call from a marshy hollow, their voices echoing against one another in an endless round. The air smells of soil that still holds heat from the day, mixed with the faint tang of smoke from villages unseen but nearby. To lighten the march, one of the older porters begins to hum a tune. His voice is deep and soon others join until the line of men moves not only in rhythm of footsteps, but in rhythm of song. The words are not known to you, yet the melody tells you enough. It is both tired and strong, weary, yet determined, carrying them forward with a beat that makes the weight on their shoulders easier to bear. Livingstone, walking near the front, glances back and smiles at the sound, knowing that music is not merely an ornament to the journey, but its breath. From time to time, the line pauses. A strap needs adjusting, a pot threatens to slip, or someone laughs about the donkey, which refuses to take another step until coaxed with a firm pull. These pauses are not irritations, but moments of shared relief. The porters tease each other with gentle humour, pretending that the donkey has decided to become the leader of the expedition, or that the spirits of the land have cursed its legs. Livingstone allows the banter, even encourages it, for he knows that laughter is as necessary as food on the road. Without it, the days stretch too long and the nights too heavy. As you imagine yourself walking with them, you may notice how the world changes when you move at this pace. There is no rushing. Each step is measured, deliberate. Time itself seems to expand, each minute filled with the sound of breathing, the creak of leather straps, the whisper of grass. The horizon does not hurry to meet you, and so the mind begins to drift, taking in details it would otherwise ignore. The way fireflies begin to flicker low to the ground, the way the sky deepens from blue to velvet black, the way the scent of the earth grows cooler as the sun's memory fades. Livingstone pauses at a small rise where the ground lifts slightly above the plain. From there, the group can see a clearing not far ahead, a space ringed by trees where the grass is lower and the soil firm. He raises a hand, signalling that this will be the night's rest. A sigh moves through the porters, part relief and part gratitude. The march, for this day at least, is done. Feet ache, shoulders burn, but already the thought of fire and food lifts the spirit. As they descend toward the clearing, Livingstone reflects aloud, his words carried gently on the night air. He notes how each day's march leaves traces not only on the land but in memory. He admits that long after maps are drawn and books written, what remains most vividly are the sounds, the laughter, the complaints, the hum of songs, and the sense of smoke, sweat, and soil. His remark is not delivered as a lecture, but as a quiet observation, one that invites you to notice your own journey. Perhaps you too remember walks taken where the smallest details lingered long after the path itself was forgotten. When the men finally reach the clearing, they drop their loads with audible relief. Cloth unrolls, pots clatter, The donkey shakes its ears with exaggerated drama, and the circle of camp begins to take shape. Fires are coaxed from dry twigs, sparks flashing briefly before settling into steady flame. The smell of smoke thickens, curling upward into the sky, where the first stars already shine like cold embers. Someone laughs again at the donkey, declaring that tomorrow it should carry nothing but its own stubbornness. Even Livingstone chuckles at the remark, scribbling it into his journal with a small smile. As the camp begins to form, you take a last glance at the path behind. It is already fading into darkness, its memory marked only by footprints and a line of bent grass. The march has ended, but the night has just begun. Ahead lies rest, stories, and firelight. Behind lies only dust and silence. In that contrast, you sense the rhythm of exploration itself, effort followed by pause, hardship followed by comfort, silence followed by companionship. Settle into that rhythm yourself. Imagine the weight of the day sliding from your shoulders as the porters set down their burdens. Feel the relief of rest as the donkey finally stops its protest. Hear the sigh of wind moving through the grass, now less a chorus of voices and more a lullaby. The march is over, and the campfire awaits. When the march finally comes to its gentle halt, the clearing ahead accepts the travellers like a long-awaited embrace. The men fan outward, their movements practised from countless nights before, and what only moments ago was an empty patch of earth becomes slowly and deliberately transformed into something that feels like a small village of its own. Bundles are untied, cloths unrolled, poles hammered into the ground with stones, and little by little the shape of shelter rises under the deepening dark. The night is not rushed. Every gesture carries the patience of men who know that rest will arrive only after work is done. At the centre of this transformation lies the fire. A small circle of stones is chosen, cleared of grass and swept of dust. Dry twigs are gathered first, then thicker branches, then a log or two carried on weary shoulders from the edge of the clearing. Sparks jump from flint and steel, glowing briefly before fading, until finally one ember catches and breathes into a curl of smoke. The porters lean close, shielding the tiny flame with calloused hands, coaxing it with soft breaths, as though encouraging a child to take its first steps. The smoke thickens, and with a crackle that sounds like laughter breaking from silence, fire takes its place at the heart of the camp. The warmth spreads in waves, and men drift toward it as naturally as moths. One sets down a pot, another arranges stones to hold it steady, and soon water simmers, ready to soften maize flour into porridge. The smell is plain, almost austere, yet in this moment it is enough to rouse smiles from tired faces. Above, the stars unfold more clearly with each passing minute, scattered across the sky like salt spilled from an unseen hand, their cold light contrasting with the orange glow below. Livingstone himself moves quietly, not commanding but participating. He kneels to adjust the pot, checks the embers, and then stands back, notebook in hand, recording with his steady pencil strokes. His words may one day be read as scientific notes, yet here they are simply impressions. How the fire bends in the wind, how laughter rises more easily when bellies begin to expect food, how the rhythm of setting up camp feels like the slow exhale after a day of holding one's breath. And then comes the donkey, that reluctant companion, whose antics have already supplied the group with laughter on the road. Tonight it decides that the fire, with its warmth and glow, is clearly meant as its own resting place. It pushes forward stubbornly, nudging aside a bundle of blankets with its nose, and plants its hooves dangerously close to the flames. The porters shout, waving their arms, until one bursts into uncontrollable laughter and declares that the donkey must believe itself promoted to guardian of the fire. The others pick up the joke instantly, insisting that the animal be given the night watch, and that all spirits, human or ghostly, must now negotiate with it before approaching the circle. The laughter spills outward, mingling with the crackling wood, and even Livingstone, often described as stern and composed, shakes his head with a smile he does not bother to hide. Beyond the circle, the world continues with its own chorus. Crickets call in waves, frogs croak from a distant pool, and somewhere a hyena's eerie whoop drifts through the night like a question without answer. Yet inside the ring of tents and firelight there is safety, a fragile bubble of warmth where fears are softened into stories and jokes. The porters begin to settle, some sitting with knees pulled to their chests, others lying back on mats to watch sparks climb upward and vanish against the stars. One man produces a small pipe, passing it slowly among his companions, the smoke curling lazily into the air to mingle with that of the fire. Livingstone observes without interruption. He knows that the fire is more than heat, it is language, binding those who sit around it into a single body. In Scotland, he once sat beside hearths that burned peat, the smoke heavy and acrid. Yet there too the flames made silence bearable and company easy. Here in Africa the fire performs the same service. It tells each man that though the wilderness presses close, though the night may carry the cries of unseen animals, there is still a circle where faces are lit, where food can be shared, and where even stubborn donkeys can become jesters. The porridge thickens, stirred with a wooden stick until it bubbles gently. Bowls are filled and passed, each man eating slowly, savouring the simple warmth. There is no feast here, yet the act of eating together turns plain maize into comfort. The donkey brays loudly, as though demanding its share, and again the circle erupts in laughter. Someone pretends to scoop a portion into a leaf, laying it at the donkey's feet with a mock bow. The animal sniffs, uninterested, then returns to pawing at the earth. More laughter follows, echoing under the trees. As the fire grows stronger, its glow spreads further into the clearing, pushing back the dark. Shadows of the porters stretch long and bend across the ground, merging with one another until they resemble a single giant figure swaying with the flames. Sparks leap upward and die, but for a moment they resemble stars falling in reverse, climbing toward the heavens rather than dropping from them. The air warms your face and arms, yet your back still feels the cool night air, reminding you always of the fragile balance between comfort and wildness. Livingstone finally sits, laying his journal aside for the moment. His gaze sweeps around the circle, and he remarks in his soft, deliberate tone that across countless cultures and times, people have always gathered around fire. It is a truth as constant as the stars, one that needs no translation. He muses that perhaps long after his journeys are forgotten, long after maps are redrawn, men will still sit around flames, telling jokes about donkeys or spirits, finding in laughter a defence stronger than weapons. His words are not grand but gentle, and they fall easily into the silence that follows. You breathe with the circle now. The night beyond is vast, perhaps even intimidating, but within the ring of fire and tents there is calm. Your body mirrors the rhythm of the flames, inhale as they rise, exhale as they settle. The warmth reaches you, and with it comes a sense of belonging. You're not a visitor, but part of the company, one more figure sitting close to the fire, letting the night take its course. And when your eyes grow heavy, you know that even if you drift, the circle of fire will remain. The porters will keep their laughter, the donkey its stubborn watch, the stars their silent vigil. Sleep can find you here, safe in the glow, as if the fire itself were breathing on your behalf. The fire is steady now, glowing like a patient heart at the centre of the camp. Most of the porters have eaten their fill of porridge and wrapped themselves in blankets, their voices softening into murmurs that drift like smoke. Yet not everyone rests at once. In every camp there are those who linger in the glow, tending to tasks that belong to the quiet hours. Tonight, among them is Livingstone, seated on a low stool with his journal balanced on his knees and beside him on the ground the small chest that holds his most precious tools. The chest is not large, but its contents carry a weight far greater than the wood and brass that make them. With deliberate hands, Livingstone opens it, revealing the polished gleam of his sextant, the steady face of his compass, and the carefully wound chronometer that ticks with the rhythm of a hidden heart. These instruments are his companions as much as any man, for they have guided him across rivers and plains, kept him steady when the land itself offered no path, and reminded him that the sky is more than decoration. It is a map written in light. He lifts the sextant first. Its frame of brass catches the firelight, glowing warm and golden, while its lenses reflect the flames in tiny bursts of brightness. To anyone untrained, it may appear like an odd contraption, more ornament than tool, but in his hands it becomes a bridge between earth and sky. Holding it gently, he tilts it upward, aligning its angles with the stars that burn far above. You follow his gaze and the night seems to open wider, the constellations stretching like rivers of silver across the darkness. He explains softly, not as a lecture but as a kind of lullaby, that by measuring the angle of a star above the horizon, one can know not only direction but distance, not only where one is but how far one has come. In the stillness, this explanation does not feel technical but poetic. It is as if the universe itself whispers directions, and the sextant is simply a way to listen more carefully. Livingstone lowers the instrument and places it back in its case with care, as though it were fragile glass, though its brass body has weathered storms and marches without complaint. Next, he turns to the compass, a smaller and simpler object, yet one that carries its own quiet authority. The needle quivers as he sets it on his palm, trembling before settling toward the north. It seems almost alive, a creature that insists upon pointing home, no matter how many times it is turned. One of the younger porters, curious but sceptical, peers over his shoulder. He shakes his head and mutters that surely a spirit must live inside the tiny box commanding the needle to move. The others laugh, teasing him gently, but the boy crosses his arms and insists, half serious, that no metal could possibly know such secrets. Livingstone smiles at this, acknowledging both the mystery and the science, admitting that even he, for all his training, sometimes marvels at the little arrow's obedience to the earth. The chronometer is lifted last, heavier than it looks, ticking steadily like a heartbeat. Its case shines in the firelight, and when Livingstone opens it, the small face of the watch gleams with delicate hands that mark time with precision. To him, it is not simply a clock but a tether between this camp in the wilderness and the larger world beyond. With it, he can calculate longitude, trace his journey on a map that others may one day hold in their own hands. To the porters, however, it is merely a box that speaks in clicks, and when Livingstone holds it to his ear, one man chuckles that perhaps it whispers secrets to him alone. The laughter is soft, not mocking but affectionate, and Livingstone accepts it with grace, closing the watch and slipping it back into its place. For a moment, silence returns. The fire pops, a donkey snorts in its sleep, and the sky above feels vast enough to swallow every thought. Livingstone sets the chest aside and reaches once more for his journal. The pages are filled with cramped lines of ink, notes on rivers, villages, plants, and animals, but also thoughts that wander beyond observation into reflection. He writes now not of distances or measurements, but of the men who laughed at the compass, the boy who hummed at the fire, the donkey that tried to take command. He writes because he knows that maps and numbers tell only part of a story, and that the rest, the warmth of voices, the stubbornness of animals, the glow of firelight, must also be remembered. You imagine his pencil scratching across the page, steady and rhythmic, a sound as soft as breath. It is not unlike your own thoughts at night, when memories press close and the act of writing feels like setting them gently to rest. He pauses often, looking up at the stars as though asking them what else should be recorded. Each pause stretches into silence, and in that silence you feel the camp itself breathing. There is a contrast in this moment that lingers with you. The instruments, sextant, compass, chronometer, belong to the language of precision, the world of lines and angles, minutes and miles. The fire, the laughter, the songs of porters and the hum of insects belong to the language of presence, the world of senses and feelings. Livingstone holds both together, neither dismissing nor exalting one above the other. In that balance you realise lies the true shape of exploration. Not conquest, not domination, but listening to numbers, to stars, to voices, to silence. The porters shift in their blankets, voices fading into sleep. One murmurs a final remark about spirits that guide the donkey, drawing a ripple of soft chuckles before the camp quiets completely. The fire burns lower, its edges crumbling into red ash, while the core glows as though guarding something secret. Livingstone closes his journal, rests it on his knees, and gazes into the embers. His face is lined with fatigue, yet also lit with a gentleness that comes only when one feels at home, even in a place far from home. If your own eyes grow heavy now, you may let them close without fear of missing anything. The instruments will remain in their chest, the compass needle still pointing north, the chronometer still ticking, the sextant still waiting for the next star. The fire will keep its watch, and the sky will still be there when you open your eyes again. Tonight, there is nothing required of you but rest. The work of marching, of setting tents, of coaxing fire from twigs and sparks, leaves every man with a hunger that presses low and insistent in the belly, and so when the water in the iron pot begins to bubble and steam, a quiet ripple of anticipation moves through the camp like wind across tall grass. The meal itself is not elaborate, not even remarkable by any measure of feasting, but on the road the simplest bowl can feel like abundance, because it carries warmth, weight, and the promise of comfort that is both physical and emotional. Maize flour is poured slowly into the simmering water, stirred with a long wooden stick that creaks. As it turns, the mixture thickens, pulling into a pale porridge that rises in bubbles, releasing a faint sweetness into the smoke-heavy air. One porter leans in, sniffing as though expecting some hidden spice to appear. But of course it is only maize, plain, sturdy, nourishing in the most unadorned way. Cups are dipped and passed around, steam curling upward in thin ribbons that catch the firelight before fading into the night. Livingstone receives his portion with the same humility as the rest. He sits among them, spooning the porridge slowly, aware that to share food is not just to satisfy hunger, but to affirm equality, to place himself not above but beside his companions. There is no ceremony here, no table or cloth, only bowls balanced on knees and hands wrapped around their warmth. Yet in the intimacy of this circle, the act becomes sacred in its own quiet way. Alongside the porridge, hardtack is produced from a tin. The biscuits are square, pale, and utterly unyielding. One porter attempts to bite into his portion, and pauses, wincing, then lifts it to the firelight as though examining a stone. With exaggerated solemnity, he taps it against the rim of his bowl, and the clang is so sharp that even the donkey, dozing at the edge of the camp, flicks its ears. Laughter breaks out, rolling easily around the circle, and someone declares that the biscuits would serve better as nails than as food. Another adds that if a lion attacked, one need only throw a biscuit at its head to knock it senseless. The humour rises, filling the clearing with warmth that is different from the fire, and Livingstone himself smiles, jotting a note in his journal with one hand while lifting porridge to his lips with the other. Not all meals, however, are limited to what the expedition carries. From time to time, villages nearby will send gifts, small gestures of hospitality offered with quiet dignity. On this night, a gourd of milk arrives, brought by a local man whose footsteps are soft as he approaches the fire. The milk is thick, with a tang that speaks of cattle fed on wild grass, and though it is shared in only small amounts, each sip feels like generosity made liquid. Another gourd holds maize beer, cloudy and faintly sour, passed carefully from hand to hand. For the porters, such gifts are more than refreshment. They are tokens of respect, signals that the road they travel is not entirely hostile but threaded with moments of human kindness. The camp receives these offerings with gratitude. Voices lower as the gourds are handled, each man bowing his head slightly before taking a sip. Livingstone, too, drinks, though cautiously, his European tongue still unused to the flavours. He writes later of such gifts in his journal, noting that they bound him to the people of the land not through treaties or transactions, but through the simple act of sharing what was scarce. Food, he observed, was never only food. It was a language, and in its giving and receiving entire, stories could be told. As the bowls empty, the fire becomes the focus once again. Men lean back on their mats, bellies eased, and voices rise in fragments of song, not full choruses, but half-remembered tunes hummed under the breath. One man stretches out with a satisfied sigh, declaring in a mock-serious tone that the porridge was so fine he must guard his bowl against spirits who might sneak in and finish the last traces. The others chuckle, nodding toward the boy who earlier warned of spirits in the grass. "Let them take your hardtack instead," someone mutters. "They'll be gone before dawn with broken teeth." Laughter returns, softer now, mingled with yawns. The night holds the camp in its wide palm. Beyond the ring of fire, the wilderness continues its song. Crickets weaving their endless chorus, frogs calling from unseen pools, a distant bark of a hyena rising and falling. Yet within the circle, the sounds are of human presence. Low laughter, the scrape of bowls, the shuffle of feet adjusting on mats. The combination creates a balance, a reminder that wilderness and humanity do not cancel each other, but overlap, each shaping the other's rhythm. Livingstone writes a final note before setting his journal aside. He records not only what was eaten, but how it was received, the way laughter rose from stubborn biscuits, the way milk passed from hand to hand carried more weight than any coin. He notes the donkey's twitching ears at the clang of hardtack against metal, for even such small details reveal the texture of life on the road. Later, readers might skim over these lines in search of discoveries or roots, but here, tonight, they are what matters. As the firelight deepens, you too may feel the heaviness that follows a meal, not unpleasant but grounding, as though the porridge has filled not only the belly but the body's very sense of belonging. Your eyes may lower, not from exhaustion, but from the calm that comes when warmth, food, and company align. You might imagine yourself leaning back as the porters do, letting your weight sink into the earth, knowing that for tonight at least, hunger has been answered and laughter has softened the edges of weariness. Close your eyes if you wish. The porridge bowl is empty, the hardtack lies half forgotten, the gourds of milk and beer have been drained. What remains is the aftertaste of companionship, the quiet memory of shared food under stars, and the steady crackle of fire that promises to keep watch until morning. The bowls have been set aside, their rims scraped clean, and the gourds emptied, leaving only the aftertaste of maize and smoke on the tongue. The fire burns lower now, no longer a blaze but a steady bed of embers that glow with the rhythm of breathing. Around this warmth, men gather closer, their knees drawn up, their bodies leaning into the flickering light. The camp has settled, yet it has not gone silent. For night is not only for rest, it is also for stories, those threads of memory and myth that keep the circle alive long after the day has ended. One of the guides, a tall man with shoulders broad as tree trunks, begins to speak. His voice is low at first, as though testing the air, but soon it rises, steady and sure, carrying across the circle. The others turn their faces toward him, some resting their chins on their hands, others already smiling in anticipation. Even the donkey, drowsy at the edge of the clearing, lifts its head briefly before returning to its half-sleep. The story is about the river, the wide and restless water that the expedition crossed earlier in their journey. He tells of a spirit that lives within the current, a being older than memory, who watches those who walk the banks and decides who may cross safely and who will be taken. The spirit, he explains, appears sometimes as a fish larger than a man, gliding beneath the surface with eyes that glimmer like lanterns. At other times, it takes the shape of a woman, her hair long as flowing reeds, her song drifting over the water in notes that draw listeners closer until they slip beneath the waves. Those who respect the river, who offer a word or a song before stepping into its waters, may pass unharmed. Those who do not listen may vanish, leaving only ripples behind. The men murmur in agreement, nodding as though the story were not invention, but reminder. One of the younger porters shivers dramatically, pulling his blanket tighter around his shoulders, and mutters that he himself once saw the shimmer of a woman's hair on the riverbank. His companions laugh, teasing him gently, but no one dismisses the story outright. For in the deep of night, when the fire is the only light and the river lies close by in darkness, who can say what lives in its waters? Livingstone listens with interest, his journal once again balanced on his knees. His pencil moves across the page, capturing the words not in full, but in fragments, sketching the shape of the tale. Yet he doesn't interrupt. He knows that these stories are not merely superstition, but ways of naming the unknown, ways of giving voice to the power of the river that even he, with all his instruments, cannot command. Later, when he writes in his journals, he may frame the tale as a cultural observation, contrasting it with his own measurements of current and depth. But tonight he allows both truths to share the same firelight, the myth and the map coexisting without quarrel. The soundscape deepens as the story continues. From somewhere far beyond the camp, faint drumming drifts on the night air, so distant it could be mistaken for the echo of footsteps. The beat is slow, patient, like the pulse of the earth itself. It might be a village celebrating, or it might be only the imagination shaping the night into music. But either way it blends with the guide's voice until the tale feels accompanied, almost sung. The insects weave their constant chorus beneath the drumming, and together they form a background against which the story glows brighter. The guide raises his hands as he speaks, fingers splayed like the ripples of water, then lets them fall into his lap. He pauses, and in that pause the fire cracks, sending up a spray of sparks that dance briefly before vanishing. The men watch them as though they too were spirits, tiny flames returning to the stars. Silence follows, not heavy but thoughtful, each man considering what he has heard. Then laughter returns, soft and easy. One porter nudges the younger man who claimed to have seen the river woman, urging him to tell more. The boy, embarrassed yet pleased, insists that he will say nothing else, for fear the spirit might hear and come for him tonight. This sparks more teasing, more gentle jokes, until the solemnity of the story dissolves into warmth. The campfire has done its work. It has carried the men from hunger into wonder, and now into laughter, each stage easing them further into the night. Livingstone closes his journal at last, his pencil tucked away, his gaze lifting to the stars above. He reflects quietly, not aloud but within himself, that such stories are as important as any map he may draw, for they reveal how people see the world and how they walk through it. Science may measure the river's width, but myth explains its spirit, and together they form a fuller truth than either alone. You, sitting among them, feel the same balance. The story lingers in your mind like a ripple, part fear, part fascination. You may imagine the river in darkness, its surface silver with starlight, and beneath it the glimmer of eyes watching. Yet the laughter of the men brings you back, softening the image, reminding you that even fear can be shared, and in sharing it becomes lighter. The fire burns low, yet its glow remains steady, painting faces in gold and shadow. The drums fade, or perhaps your ears grow used to them, until only the insects and the occasional pop of wood remain. The guide folds his hands, satisfied with his tale, and leans back against his mat. One by one, the others follow, stretching out beneath blankets, murmuring final words before sleep claims them. If your own eyes begin to close, let them. The story has been told, the laughter has softened its edge, and the fire will keep its vigil until dawn. You carry with you both the myth of the river spirit and the image of Livingstone's steady pen strokes, two ways of knowing that together form a lullaby of their own. The fire has settled into its late rhythm, a slow breathing of embers that glow red at the core and fade into grey at the edges. Most of the camp has fallen asleep by now, men stretched on mats beneath the open sky, blankets pulled close against the creeping coolness that arrives in the hours before dawn. The air feels different at this time, thinner, quieter, as if the world itself holds its breath. Yet not everyone sleeps, for in every camp there must be a watch, someone who keeps eyes open while others close theirs, someone who listens for what might stir beyond the circle of light. Tonight the duty falls to one of the younger porters. He sits upright, his blanket draped around his shoulders, a spear resting lightly across his knees. His eyes wander constantly, shifting from the fire to the trees, from the trees to the sky, as though trying to take in everything at once. Now and then he pokes the embers with a stick, coaxing the flames a little higher, as if the brightness itself might push back whatever lingers in the shadows. The camp is silent save for his small movements and the soft sighs of those who sleep. Then, from the distance, a sound cuts through the stillness. It begins as a low vibration, almost like the roll of thunder, then rises into a roar so deep it seems to shake the ground itself. The boy stiffens, eyes wide, spear lifting instinctively. Another roar follows, closer this time, and the dogs tethered at the camp's edge erupt into barks, their chains rattling as they strain toward the sound. The fire pops, sparks leaping upward as though startled too. "Lion," the boy whispers, though no one has asked. His voice trembles and he looks around the camp as if hoping someone else will rise, someone older, someone who has faced such nights before. One of the men stirs in his sleep but does not wake. The donkey brays loudly, stamping its hooves, and then falls silent again. The boy tightens his grip on the spear, heart pounding loud enough, he imagines, that the lion could hear it. From one of the mats, Livingstone stirs. He does not rise quickly, nor does he speak in alarm. Instead, he pushes himself upright slowly, rubbing the weariness from his eyes, and then looks toward the edge of the camp where the sound had come from. Another roar follows, deep and rolling, but still distant enough that the trees blur its origin. Livingstone listens for a long moment, then lets out a soft breath, calm as though the roar were nothing more than wind. The boy cannot hide his fear. He mutters that the lion must be an angry ancestor, returning to punish them for disturbing the land. His voice quivers, but his eyes remain fixed on the dark beyond the fire. The other porters, half awake now, shift uneasily, their faces reflecting the same mixture of dread and belief. The wilderness is full of more than animals, they say. It is filled with spirits, and the lion's cry is proof enough. Livingstone leans forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and speaks in a tone so quiet it almost blends with the fire's crackle. He tells the boy that when he was a child in Scotland, wolves sometimes howled from the hills at night. To a young boy lying awake in his bed, the sound felt close enough to scrape against the walls, but his father, unafraid, told him that wolves are creatures of habit, that they roam their paths and sing to the night but do not come closer unless hunger drives them. He remembers lying in the dark listening to the howls until they became less like threats and more like a kind of wild music. The boy glances at him, still clutching his spear, uncertain whether to believe. Livingstone smiles faintly and adds that lions too are singers of the night. Their voices carry far across the plains, magnified by the emptiness, and though they sound near, they may be miles away. He points toward the dogs, whose barking has already begun to soften into nervous whines. If the lion were closer, he says gently, the dogs would not bark, they would be silent. The explanation does not erase the boy's fear completely, but it steadies him. His grip on the spear loosens and he leans back slightly, though his eyes still dart toward the trees. The older porters chuckle softly now, teasing him with whispers that the spirits must have mistaken his blanket for a prize. One nudges him, saying he should tie it tighter before the ancestors steal it away. The boy groans, half laughing, half annoyed, and mutters that if the spirits want his blanket, they can keep it. The phrase, blanket spirits, takes root instantly, repeated by others with amusement, until even the boy himself laughs at the absurdity. The fire crackles, laughter fades, and the camp begins to settle again. The roar comes once more, softer this time, then drifts away into the distance. The dogs lie down, ears twitching but no longer barking, their bodies stretched against the earth as though reassured. The boy relaxes further, his eyes finally leaving the trees to rest on the embers. He draws his blanket tighter, not against spirits, but against the chill, and allows his shoulders to ease. Livingstone lies back down, journal still at his side, though he does not open it. He closes his eyes, trusting that the boy will keep watch, and perhaps knowing that the lesson tonight was not about lions, but about courage shared in company. The boy, for his part, sits straighter now, as though the act of being frightened and then reassured has given him a kind of dignity. He watches the fire not with dread but with focus, determined to keep it alive until dawn. And you, sitting quietly in this circle, feel the calm return as well. The roar of the lion lingers in memory, but no longer as terror, rather as proof that the night holds many voices, each with its own rhythm. Some are human, some animal, some imagined, yet all belong to the same wilderness. You listen to the fire's crackle, the slow breathing of men asleep, the occasional stamp of a donkey's hoof, and you know that the camp, fragile as it is, remains whole. Close your eyes if you wish. The watch is kept, the fire still glows, and though lions may sing in the dark, their voices are part of the lullaby of the land. Rest comes easily when the circle is strong, when even fears can be turned into stories, and when the night itself seems willing to keep guard. The night lingers longest. In its final hours, when the embers of the fire burn low and the world holds to its silence as though unwilling to release the dark, yet slowly, almost without notice, the first signs of dawn begin to arrive. They do not come with sudden brightness, but with subtle changes. The faint paling of the eastern horizon, the coolness in the air deepening, the insects softening their relentless chorus. For those who are awake, the transition is less an event than a slow unfolding, like a curtain being drawn thread by thread to reveal the stage of day. The boy who kept the watch still sits upright, his blanket wrapped tightly around his shoulders, though his head dips now and then as drowsiness tugs at him. He has tended the fire faithfully, feeding it with dry sticks until it glows enough to keep the circle alive, but he too glances often toward the sky, hoping to see the night surrender to light. Around him the camp stirs in fragments. A donkey shifts its weight, stamping hooves softly against the ground. A dog lifts its head, ears twitching at the faintest rustle. One of the older porters rolls onto his side with a sigh that seems to echo relief even in sleep. The first true heralds of morning are the birds. Their voices cut through the fading darkness with clarity that feels almost sharp. A single call repeated until answered by another, and then another, until the air seems stitched together with sound. Some notes are bright, like drops of water striking stone. Others are low, like whistles carried far by wind. Together they weave a chorus that rises steadily, drowning out the last whispers of night insects. It is not loud, yet it is insistent, reminding every creature that the day has begun whether they wish it or not. Livingstone rises early, as he often does, pushing aside his blanket with deliberate slowness, stretching stiff limbs before reaching for his journal. He has always preferred these hours, when the camp is half asleep and the world seems to belong only to those who wake willingly. He settles near the fire, its glow paling now in comparison to the horizon, and opens the leather cover of his book. The pencil scratches softly across the page, recording not discoveries of grandeur but the small details that shape a day. The quality of the soil beneath their mats, the temper of the donkey after last night's commotion, the way the lion's roar seemed nearer than it was. He writes too of the boy on watch, noting his courage tempered by fear, the way humour saved the night, and how laughter around a fire is sometimes more powerful than any weapon. The porters begin to stir one by one, drawn from dreams not by voices but by the shift in light. Eyes blink open, mats are folded, and blankets shaken free of the dust that settles everywhere. Yawns stretch into the cool air, and conversations resume in fragments, soft at first, then louder as more men join in. One complains that the hardtack from last night still sits like a stone in his belly. Another insists that the milk gifted by the villagers gave him dreams so vivid he woke laughing, and soon the camp hums with ordinary chatter that feels as steady as the birdsong above. The mist rises from the river in the distance, unfurling in pale ribbons that catch the first strokes of sunlight. It drifts through the grasses, curling around the trunks of trees, making the world appear half-hidden, as though wrapped in gauze. The porters point toward it, some murmuring about spirits walking, others admiring its beauty without fear. Livingstone notes it too, writing that the river at dawn is always a mystery, veiled and elusive, unwilling to show its full shape until the sun commands it. For you, watching from the edge of the circle, the scene is almost dreamlike. The horizon glows faintly gold, the mist folds and unfolds, the fire smoulders in quiet defiance of the growing day. The men moving through the clearing are silhouettes, their forms softened by haze, each step sending little puffs of dust into air already heavy with moisture. It's the kind of morning that feels both timeless and fragile, as though it could belong to centuries past or present, unchanged by the years that separate one dawn from another. The boy who kept watch finally lowers his spear, setting it across his mat with a sigh of triumph, as though completing some sacred task. His eyes are heavy, but his smile is proud. The others tease him gently, congratulating him for keeping the lions at bay and joking that the blanket spirits must have grown weary of waiting. He laughs with them, relief softening the memory of his earlier fear, and curls into his blanket at last, ready to sleep as the sun begins to rise. His place at the fire is taken by another, who stretches, yawns, and sets about preparing water for tea. The tea is weak, little more than tinted water steeped with dry leaves, but the steam carries comfort nonetheless. Mugs are passed slowly around the circle, hands warming against the metal as men sip carefully. The flavour is faint, almost lost beneath the smoke on the tongue, but it serves its purpose, to signal the start of a new day, to steady bodies for the march ahead, to anchor the camp in routine. Livingstone drinks his portion without complaint, grateful not for taste but for ritual, the way a sip of warm liquid feels like a gentle welcome into morning. The mist thickens briefly, curling low across the clearing, and for a moment it feels as though the camp itself floats on a cloud. Then the sun breaks free, spilling light that pierces the haze and scatters it into fragments. Shadows sharpen, colours return, and the world shifts from dream into clarity. Mats are packed, loads are tied, the donkey is coaxed into obedience with a tug on its rope, and the circle that was home for the night begins to dissolve. The fire is doused, leaving only a patch of blackened earth and a faint column of smoke that drifts upward, carrying with it the memory of warmth. As you watch the camp prepare to move again, you cannot help but feel the tenderness of the moment just past. The dawn has not rushed but crept, wrapping the camp in its blanket of mist, filling it with bird song, lifting it slowly into the day. And though the march ahead may hold hardship, storms or silence, this morning has offered a gift, a reminder that even in the wilderness, mornings arrive with the same patience, the same light, the same invitation to rise, as they always have and always will. If your eyes are heavy now, let them rest. Imagine the mist wrapping around you like a soft cloth. Imagine the birds singing their patient notes above. Imagine the warmth of weak tea in your hands. Morning will come whether you watch it or not, and the world will continue to move gently forward. You may drift, as the camp itself once did, from night into day without struggle, without effort, carried on the quiet tide of dawn. The camp has shaken off its drowsiness, the mist of dawn lifting slowly to reveal the outline of trees, grasses, and the faint silver of the river winding not far away. The porters have begun their usual rhythm of folding mats, checking loads, and coaxing the donkey into something resembling cooperation, when a quiet change in the air spreads across the clearing. Heads turn almost at once, and whispers pass from man to man, carrying the news that visitors approach. The sound that reaches them first is not heavy or hurried, but deliberate, the measured tread of feet that know exactly where they're going. Out of the thinning veil of morning steps a small group of men. At their centre walks a figure whose presence is unmistakable. The local chief, tall and composed, moves with the kind of calm that comes not from force, but from the steady assurance of belonging. His robe, woven from cloth dyed in deep earthy tones, drapes across his shoulders and flows down to his ankles. Around his neck glints a necklace of beads, each one catching the rising sun with a different flash of colour. His staff, carved with careful patterns, strikes the ground with each step like punctuation. Not harsh, not loud, but firm enough to remind everyone that he is a man accustomed to being heard without raising his voice. The porters instinctively lower their tones, arranging themselves with subtle care as if tidying the camp in honour of the guest. Livingstone rises to his feet, brushing dust from his trousers, and steps forward to meet the chief. He does not approach as conqueror or judge, but as guest, bowing his head slightly in greeting. The chief inclines his own in return, and for a moment the two men stand in silence, measuring each other not with suspicion but with quiet respect. Then the chief raises his hand, and one of his companions steps forward, carrying a gourd polished smooth from use. He holds it out with both hands, a gesture of generosity, and places it in Livingstone's palms. Inside is fresh milk, thick and fragrant, cool from the clay vessel that has kept it through the night. Another gourd follows, this one filled with millet flour, a small portion taken from the stores of the village. These are not extravagant gifts, but in their context they are deeply significant. For to share food is to share trust, to acknowledge the traveller not as intruder but as fellow human. Livingstone accepts them with careful dignity, bowing once more, his voice steady as he speaks words of gratitude. He offers in return a small parcel of cloth, folded neatly, and a handful of beads carried for such exchanges. The beads glimmer in the chief's hand, bright against the deep hue of his robe, and though their value is not measured in weight, they carry the mark of connection. The chief nods, satisfied not with the objects themselves, but with the gesture of reciprocity. Around them, the camp watches with quiet fascination. The porters smile, murmuring among themselves, some remarking that the milk will sweeten their morning porridge, others that the chief's calm presence is itself a blessing on the road. The donkey, stubborn as always, chooses this moment to bray loudly, shaking its head as though to claim attention. A ripple of laughter spreads through the group, breaking the solemnity without diminishing the respect. Even the chief's lips twitch in the smallest of smiles, the kind that passes quickly but leaves warmth behind. Livingstone gestures toward the fire, inviting the visitors to share in its circle. The chief lowers himself to a mat provided, his staff resting across his knees, while his companion sits slightly behind, their eyes attentive, their posture respectful. Cups are filled with weak tea and passed carefully. The chief sips, unbothered by its thin flavour, and for a while conversation flows in the simplest way. Questions about the journey, remarks about the weather, small stories exchanged without the need for grand declarations. The words themselves may not carry across all languages perfectly, but tone and gesture bridge the gaps, and the fire between them becomes a third participant, steady and impartial. Livingstone later writes in his journal that such moments mattered more than miles travelled. A map could record rivers and mountains, but only encounters like this revealed the human landscape, the threads of courtesy, hospitality and dignity that bound the land together. He notes the way the chief's robe shifted in the light, the texture of the beads, the way the milk tasted richer because it carried generosity with it. These are not measurements of distance, but they are measures of connection, and to Livingstone they carry equal weight. For you, seated quietly near the circle, the scene becomes almost ceremonial in its calm. The fire glows, the smoke rises, the milk passes from hand to hand, and the morning seems to pause as if to watch. The horizon brightens further, the mist thinning until the trees reveal themselves in full, each leaf catching light, each branch stretching outward as though acknowledging the dignity of the gathering below. When the time comes for the chief to depart, he rises without haste. His companions gather the gift given in return, and with a nod that is both farewell and blessing, he turns back toward the path. His robe sways gently as he walks, the staff tapping once more in rhythm until the group disappears into the trees. The camp exhales in unison, not from relief, but from the recognition that they have been part of something meaningful. Livingstone stands for a long moment, watching the path where the chief vanished, before turning back to the fire. He does not speak immediately, but when he does, it is with the simplicity of a man who knows the weight of small exchanges. Hospitality, he murmurs, bridges the space between strangers better than any map. The porters nod, some not even needing the words to know their truth. The camp resumes its rhythm. Loads are lifted once again, mats folded, embers scattered with sand, but the air feels lighter, touched by the grace of the encounter. The gifts of milk and flour are set carefully aside, to be shared later on the road, not just as nourishment, but as reminders that kindness flows through the wilderness as surely as rivers do. If your eyes begin to close now, you may let them. The chief has come and gone, leaving dignity behind him like a footprint that will not fade. The fire still glows, the porters still murmur, the river still hums beneath the rising sun. You're safe within the circle of respect, wrapped in the quiet strength of hospitality. The sun has risen high enough now that the mist has nearly vanished, leaving behind a world edged in gold. Shadows grow shorter, and the air begins to warm, though not yet with the heavy press of midday. The camp, still half in the process of packing and preparing for the next stretch of road, pauses when one of the younger porters calls out with an exaggerated cough and a mischievous gleam in his eyes. He is a boy barely into manhood, quick to laugh, quicker still to turn the simplest event into a story worth retelling. His companions shake their heads, some smiling, others groaning in anticipation, for they know his habit of spinning long tales at the slightest excuse. He sits cross-legged on the ground, a strip of cloth tied loosely around his forehead, his bundle of belongings beside him, already secured for the march. In his hand he holds a twig, and with it he sketches circles in the dust, as though mapping out the shape of his narrative before he even begins. "You think this donkey is stubborn," he says, nodding toward the animal that flicks its tail impatiently at flies. "But you have not yet heard of the day when my village learned the true meaning of stubbornness." A few men chuckle, leaning back on their mats. One mutters that the boy's village must have been the birthplace of stubbornness itself. Judging by the way he argues over every load he's given, the boy grins unfazed and raises his voice slightly, so that even Livingstone, seated nearby with his journal, looks up with interest. He tells of a morning when he was younger, still a child, sent with others to fetch water from the river. They carried gourds balanced on their heads, laughing and pushing each other along the path, when suddenly they spotted a strange object gleaming in the grass. It was a compass, though of course none of them knew the word for it. The little needle trembled under glass, swinging this way and that, always pointing north, though they could not understand why. The boy leans forward, his voice dropping to a whisper as though confessing a secret. "We thought it was a prison," he says, "a prison for a restless spirit. See how it tried to escape, turning round and round, but always it was forced back to face one way." His companions laugh aloud, some clutching their sides, for they have heard this story before, yet it never loses its charm. The boy continues, claiming that they dared not touch the object at first, fearing the spirit inside would leap out and curse them. Instead, they stood in a circle, debating whether to bury it, throw it in the river, or take it to the village elder. In the end, curiosity triumphed, and they carried it back carefully, each boy nudging the other forward to bear the burden. When they presented it to the elder, he examined it with solemn care. After a long silence, he declared that it was indeed the work of spirits, perhaps left behind by strangers from beyond the horizon. The children gasped while the elder tucked it away as though safeguarding a dangerous charm. And that, the porter concludes with a flourish, is why we learned never to pick up strange objects in the grass, unless, of course, they turn out to be biscuits hard enough to kill a lion. The circle erupts in laughter again. The hardtack joke from the previous night folded neatly into the tale. Livingstone, amused, explains gently that the compass is no prison, but a tool, one he himself carries and uses daily. He shows his own, pulling it from his pocket, and the needle trembles before settling, as it always does, toward north. The boy leans close, eyes wide, though his grin never fades. He declares loudly that if it is not a prison, then surely it is magic, for how else could a small arrow know its way better than a man? Others join in, debating whether perhaps Livingstone's compass is a tame spirit that obeys him alone, while wild ones still wander free in the grass. The laughter swells, rolling across the clearing until even the donkey brays as if in mock agreement. Livingstone chuckles softly, shaking his head, but he does not press the point further. He has long since learned that explanations do not erase wonder. Sometimes they even enhance it. The boy, encouraged by his success, shifts from the compass tale to stories of his village, of fields of millet glowing gold under the sun, of evenings when drums called the people to gather, of nights when fires burned high and songs rose into the sky until even the stars seemed to listen. He speaks of his grandmother, who told him stories of spirits that lived in trees, who whispered through leaves on windy nights, who demanded respect whenever wood was cut for fire. He speaks too of the time a great storm tore through the village, and everyone believed it was the wrath of ancestors displeased by careless words. His storytelling is not polished, yet it carries the vividness of lived memory, and those who listen feel transported to his village paths, hearing drums, smelling rain-soaked earth, and watching sparks from great fires leap upward into dark skies. Livingstone writes in his journal, his pencil moving steadily. He records not only the words but the laughter, the gestures, the way the boy's eyes shine when he speaks of his home. He knows that these fragments of memory are as much a part of exploration as rivers and mountains. They reveal what cannot be measured in miles, the inner landscapes of the people who share his journey. For you, listening by the fire's remnants, the boy's voice weaves a tapestry that is both strange and familiar. You may never have seen his village, yet the way he describes its fields, its songs, its spirits feels close, as if memory itself were contagious. His companion's laughter adds warmth, making the scene less a performance than a shared act of belonging. You sense that in this moment, the boy is no longer just a porter carrying loads on weary shoulders, but a storyteller, a keeper of his people's spirit, giving shape to the unseen world. When at last his words slow and his twig falls still in the dust, the camp lingers in a silence filled not with absence but with contentment. Someone pats him on the back, another calls him a fool, and yet another insists that perhaps his grandmother was right about the spirits after all. The boy grins, accepting both praise and teasing with equal pride. Livingstone closes his journal with care, remarking quietly that stories travel farther than feet. The boy, perhaps not fully understanding the words, nods anyway, pleased that his tale has been written down alongside rivers and stars. If your own eyes grow heavy now, you may let them close, for the story has been told and laughter has done its work. Around you lies the sense of a village recreated in words, alive for a moment in the wilderness, before dissolving gently into memory. The camp prepares once again to move, but you may rest here, wrapped in the warmth of voices that carry across time. Every journey is carried not only on strong shoulders and steady steps, but also on the constant attention given to the smallest of objects, the quiet care that prevents disaster before it ever appears. A camp in the wilderness, no matter how carefully built the night before, always wakes to the need for repair. The morning after the chief's visit is no exception. Once breakfast has been shared and mats rolled, the porters spread their belongings across the clearing like a merchant laying out wares, not for trade but for inspection. Boots are pulled from weary feet, straps are loosened, cloth is shaken free of dust, and at once a low murmur of activity fills the air. The smell of smoke still lingers from the doused fire, mixing with the sharp scent of leather warmed by sun. Livingstone sits nearby, watching as his companions tend to their gear. A pair of boots lies across his knees, the soles worn thin from weeks of march. He takes a needle threaded with waxed cord and begins to stitch patiently, pulling each loop tight. His fingers, accustomed to writing and holding instruments, are clumsy with such work, but he persists. Beside him, one of the older porters demonstrates quicker movements, sewing with the ease of a long practice, his hands flying like birds across cloth. They share a smile, each acknowledging the other's effort, each aware that in this land even the smallest tear can widen into calamity. Nearby, a canvas sheet is stretched taut across the ground, its surface marked with holes from sparks that leapt from the fire during the night. A group of men crouches over it, cutting patches from an older piece of cloth and stitching them carefully in place. Their laughter drifts upward as they work, for one insists that the holes are gifts from spirits angry that the tent was placed on their favourite patch of earth. Another retorts that the spirits must be poor marksmen if they can only hit canvas and never flesh. The joke grows, voices rising, until even those mending boots join in, nodding solemnly as if to confirm that spirits are notoriously clumsy in their mischief. It is in the midst of this banter that one of the younger porters, the same boy who told stories of his village and the compass, manages to turn humour into spectacle. He has been entrusted with carrying a folded map, drawn carefully by Livingstone the night before, and as he opens it to admire the neat lines of rivers and hills, his hand slips, tearing the paper clean along one edge. A silence falls for a moment, the tear loud in its suddenness, and the boy freezes, mouth open, eyes wide. Then, with a seriousness that fools no one, he lifts his hand toward the sky and declares that spirits must have done it, sneaking into the camp at dawn to punish him for telling too many tales. The men burst into laughter, some doubling over, others clapping him on the back as if he had delivered the finest of performances. "Spirits again," one says, shaking his head. "First they try to take your blanket, now they tear maps. Perhaps tomorrow they will walk off with your shoes." The boy, grinning, insists that the spirits must fear his strength, for they never dare show themselves, and this only deepens the laughter. Livingstone, though momentarily pained by the loss of his map, cannot help but smile at the quick turn of humour. He retrieves the torn paper, smoothing it gently on his knee, and produces a small pot of glue from his chest. With steady hands he joins the edges again, pressing until they hold, and remarks softly that maps, like journeys, are easily broken but also easily mended. The boy nods solemnly, though his eyes still dance with mischief. In his journal, later that evening, Livingstone notes not only the repair of the map, but the way laughter transformed frustration into memory worth keeping. All around, the work continues. Pots are scrubbed with handfuls of grass, leaving their metal surfaces dull but clean. Knots are retied on bundles of food, ropes checked for fraying, straps tightened around loads to be carried. The donkey, restless as always, stamps and snorts as its harness is adjusted, drawing more jokes about its stubborn spirit. Even the dogs, tugging against their ropes, join the chorus of sounds that fill the camp with life. Each act, though small, feels essential, for on a road where every step may bring rain, thorn or stone, preparedness is a kind of shield. You watch the scene unfold and realise that this too is part of exploration. The unseen hours, the patient mending, the hands that keep a camp alive one stitch at a time. Without such care, no discovery could be written, no map drawn, no journal filled. These repairs are the hidden foundation beneath every story told around the fire, the quiet labour that ensures the journey continues. The sun climbs higher, warming the clearing until sweat beads on foreheads and dust clings stubbornly to skin. Yet the work does not falter. Men crouch in shadows where they can, sewing by the light that filters through leaves, their voices rising and falling in conversation that drifts as easily as smoke. Some hum softly as they patch, others whistle, the sounds mingling with the rustle of trees and the distant call of birds. Livingstone at last sets aside his boots, the stitching done, though uneven. He laughs at his own handiwork, remarking that the first puddle will surely test his skills more harshly than any cobbler back home. The men nod, one offering to reinforce the seams later, but for now the boots will suffice. The repaired map dries against a rock, its edges sealed, its lines intact once more. The canvas tent patched with care is folded neatly, ready for the march. The camp, once scattered with tools and belongings, regains its order. Bundles are tied, chests closed, mats stacked. The donkey, after much coaxing, accepts its load without further protest, though not without one final bray that seems almost like complaint. Laughter follows it, as always, and someone declares that the spirits must be riding on its back, weighing it down. In this blend of labour and humour, the camp breathes as one body. Each man's hands move differently, yet all contribute to the same purpose, to keep the fragile circle of their world intact. The work may not appear in books, yet without it there would be no books to write. It is in the patched seams, the tightened knots, the mended maps that journeys endure. As the morning edges toward midday, the camp prepares to move again. The fire is doused, leaving only a darkened patch of earth. The repaired boots slip onto feet, the stitched canvas rests atop loads, the joined map slides carefully back into Livingstone's chest. Everything broken has been tended, and with that tending comes not only usefulness but peace. If your own thoughts are frayed, you may let them be patched here. Imagine the careful needle drawing thread through leather, the glue sealing paper, the laughter covering small mistakes. Close your eyes if you wish, and feel the camp's repairs becoming your own, steadying what is fragile, mending what is torn, until you too feel whole and ready to continue. The day has passed into evening once more, and the clearing that only hours ago rang with the sound of repairs and preparation now grows still, its surface brushed with silver from a rising moon. The tents stand like quiet guardians, their patched cloth faintly glowing in the pale light, and the air has cooled enough that the breath of each man curls faintly as he exhales. The fire burns at the centre, not fierce but steady, its flames bending with every soft gust of wind, casting shadows that lean and sway as though listening to what comes next. It begins almost without announcement. One of the porters, a man with a voice deep as the riverbed, hums a line of melody while adjusting his mat near the fire. At first it seems casual, an idle tune meant only to fill the silence, but then another joins, his voice higher, weaving above the first like a bird circling a tree. Soon, a third and a fourth add their tones, and before long the clearing is wrapped in a tapestry of sound, low and high, steady and wavering, all of it blending into a harmony that feels older than the road they travel. Livingstone, seated with his journal on his lap, looks up and stills his hand. He does not write immediately, for to capture the moment in words too soon might reduce it, and he prefers to let the sound linger, as pure experience first. He leans back, his eyes half closed, listening as the voices rise and fall, carrying with them the weight of histories he does not yet know, memories of villages and families, tales of spirits and ancestors told not in speech, but in song. The songs are not formal, not rehearsed. They drift from one melody to another, sometimes overlapping, sometimes pausing so that only a single voice carries the night before others rejoin. Some verses are playful, drawing laughter, others solemn, echoing with something that feels like prayer. The fire crackles in rhythm, sparks lifting to the sky where stars glitter like notes written across a vast sheet of night. You listen too, drawn into the circle as though the voices rise not only from men by the fire but from the earth beneath them, from the trees, from the river winding unseen in the distance. The music carries you beyond words, into feeling, the weight of the march transformed into tone, the ache of shoulders softened into melody, the long miles stitched together in harmonies that ask nothing but presence. One song turns toward lullaby, its rhythm slower, its tone gentle as though meant for children, though no children are here. The porters sing anyway, perhaps remembering sons and daughters left in villages, perhaps comforting themselves as much as one another. The lullaby drifts across the fire, touching each man until even the donkey, restless creature that it is, lowers its head and seems calmed by the sound. The dogs curl closer to the flames, ears twitching but bodies relaxed, as if lulled into trust. Livingstone reaches for his pencil at last, sketching brief notes in the margin of his journal. He writes that the voices of his companions carry the same strength as rivers, that they travel farther than footsteps, that they belong not only to the singers but to the land itself. He wonders aloud, so softly that it seems more to himself than to anyone else, whether future travellers will ever hear these songs or whether they will vanish with the men who sing them now. The porters glance at him, some smiling, one shrugging, and then continue singing as though to remind him that the songs exist fully in the moment and need not be preserved to be real. The moon climbs higher, painting the camp in sharper silver. The flames glow orange and gold against that cold light, making faces flicker between warmth and shadow. One porter begins to clap gently, his hands creating a rhythm that guides the voices into unity. Another taps the rim of a pot, adding a metallic echo, thin but clear. Soon the clearing hums with a layered chorus, voices, claps, metal taps, and fire crackles blending into a single pulse that seems to expand and contract with the very breath of the camp. For you, seated among them, the experience is immersive, like drifting on a river of sound. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine the world outside the clearing. the tall grasses bending in wind, the river mist rising, the lions prowling unseen. All of it seems distant now, softened by the blanket of music. You feel safe not because danger has disappeared, but because voices have transformed fear into song, weaving safety out of sound itself. Livingstone does not sing, but he listens with a reverence that borders on awe. His presence is quiet, his head bowed slightly, as though acknowledging that here he is the guest, the student, the one who must learn from the rhythms of others. He sketches a rough outline of the camp in his journal, shading in the fire, the moon, the men seated in a circle, their mouths open mid-song. The drawing is simple, the lines unsteady in the low light, yet he smiles at it, for it reminds him that maps do not only chart rivers and mountains, they can chart moments of the heart as well. When the songs finally taper, it is not with abruptness but with gradual slowing, as though the music itself has grown weary, stretching into silence the way a fire burns into ash. One voice hums a final note, another answers, and then the air holds stillness once more. The porters sigh, some lying back at once, others lingering to poke the fire, watching sparks rise like the last notes of melody fading into the sky. You remain quiet, holding the echo within you, letting it settle like warmth in the chest. The night feels softer now, the air cooler, the shadows deeper, yet the memory of song lingers like a shield. It is not gone, it drifts within you, ready to rise again whenever memory calls. If your eyelids are heavy, you may let them close. Imagine the moonlight painting silver across the canvas of tents. Imagine the voices still humming just beyond hearing. Imagine yourself cradled in the lullaby that drifted across the fire. Sleep comes easily when song has paved the way, when silence after music feels like the pause before a dream. Night has fallen once again, as it always does, with a patience that feels inevitable. The fire burns at the centre of the clearing, not young and vigorous as in the early evening, but settled into maturity, its flames bending in slow arcs, its embers glowing like hidden jewels. Around it, the porters sit in a semicircle, their faces lit in shifting hues of orange and shadow, their voices low after the long day of marching. Beyond the circle, the dark is immense, carrying with it the faint rush of water, a river not far from where they have made their camp, its current whispering steadily as though rehearsing a story of its own. It is in this moment of stillness that one of the elders clears his throat. He has not spoken much on the journey, preferring to let the younger men chatter, but now he leans forward, eyes reflecting the firelight, and begins to speak. His words carry the gravity of age, each syllable slow and deliberate, as though carved rather than spoken. The others quiet at once, shifting closer to listen. For everyone knows that when an elder chooses to tell a story, it is not simply entertainment, but inheritance. He speaks of the river, the wide expanse of water that flows like a vein across the land, carrying life in its current, but also danger. Long before explorers traced its course on maps, he says, the river was known as a living being, older than villages, older even than the forest through which it wound. To some it was a god, to others a spirit, to others still a creature of immense power, neither benevolent nor cruel, but simply eternal. The elder's voice deepens as he describes how, in times of plenty, the river swelled with generosity, bringing fish that shimmered silver under the sun, water for fields and safe passage for canoes. Yet in times of anger, it grew dark and swift, swallowing whole trees, overturning boats, and dragging the careless into its depths. The fire crackles, punctuating his words. The men lean closer, eyes fixed on him as though the flames themselves were drawing the story into shape. Even the donkey, half asleep, stirs and flicks its ears, while the dogs prick their heads toward the direction of the river, sensing the power that lies in the tale. The elder continues, telling of a time when the river demanded an offering. Long ago, he says, when drought had plagued the land and the water ran low, the people brought gifts, beads, food, carved figures of wood, and set them afloat upon the surface. Some say the gifts vanished instantly, swallowed by the current. Others claim the gifts reappeared days later in distant villages, proving that the river not only took but gave, linking communities far apart. The younger porters glance at one another, some smiling, some wide-eyed. A few make quiet comments, recalling their own villages' tales of rivers and spirits. One insists that his grandfather saw a fish as large as a canoe rise from the water at dawn, shimmering with scales that reflected every colour of the sun. Another shakes his head, saying that in his homeland the river spirits were women, their hair long and black, who sang from the banks to lure men away. The voices blend, each adding detail, until the clearing feels filled with invisible presences, each as real as the sparks that leap from the fire into the night. Livingstone listens carefully, his journal again resting across his knees. He does not interrupt, does not attempt to explain currents or floods, though he knows their causes. Instead, he writes what he hears, shaping the words into lines of ink that future readers may one day puzzle over. He believes that to record these stories is as important as to measure the river's breadth, for they reveal how the land is understood by those who live upon it, how the unseen is given shape through imagination, and how myth and geography flow together like two currents in the same channel. The sound of the actual river drifts into the camp, as if to confirm the elder's words. It gurgles over stones, swells into deeper pools, and breaks into foam where hidden branches lie submerged. In the firelight, the men fall silent again, listening not only to the elder but to the water itself. It is easy to believe, in that pause, that the river is indeed alive, breathing steadily through the night, carrying stories as surely as it carries fish and silt. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine its surface. The moon high above casts a silver path across it, shimmering like a road for spirits to walk upon. The trees lean over the banks, their reflections trembling in the ripples. Somewhere beneath, unseen shapes glide. Fish, yes, but perhaps also something older, something the stories call forth. You feel the pull of the water even from here, the sense that it could carry you away in a heartbeat, not cruelly but inevitably like time itself. The elder finishes with a final reminder that the river is not to be feared nor ignored, but respected. Those who listen to its song will find safe passage. Those who turn deaf ears may find themselves taken. His words hang in the air, heavy as mist, before dissolving into the crackle of the fire. The men nod, some murmuring prayers, others simply gazing toward the sound of rushing water as if acknowledging its presence. Then laughter breaks the solemnity. One of the younger men whispers that the spirits of the river would surely avoid their camp, for the hardtack is still lying untouched, and no spirit would risk breaking its teeth on such fare. The circle erupts, chuckles bouncing off the trees, and the elder himself smiles, shaking his head at the irreverence of youth. The fear that had briefly tightened shoulders softens into warmth, and once again the night balances between awe and humour. Livingstone sets aside his journal, satisfied that both myth and laughter have been preserved on the page. He leans back, gazing at the stars, and thinks perhaps that rivers are not so different from people. They carry many voices, some solemn, some playful, and all worth listening to. The fire burns lower, the elder folds his hands across his knees, and the camp drifts towards sleep. Yet the sound of the river remains, a lullaby of water, steady and unending. If your eyes close now, you may let its current carry you too. Imagine yourself floating, not in danger but in peace. The cool water surrounding you, the stars reflected above, the mythic spirit of the river guiding you safely through the night. The rhythm of the journey is shaped as much by food as by footsteps, for hunger is a companion that never lags far behind. By late afternoon, after hours of walking through grass that reach their waists and over earth baked hard by sun, the men feel the familiar ache of emptiness pressing at their stomachs. When at last the camp is chosen and the fire coaxed once again into life, the bundles of maize are untied and bowls are set upon the ground with anticipation. It is then, just as the porridge begins to thicken in the pot and the smell of boiled grain drifts through the clearing, that a quarrel rises, small at first, no more than a murmur, then louder, sharp enough to bend the air. Two of the porters stand facing one another, arms crossed, brows furrowed, each insisting that the other has taken more than his rightful share. The maize, ground coarse and stored in sacks carried day after day on weary shoulders, is measured carefully, for it must last not only tonight but tomorrow, and the many tomorrows after that. Yet hunger makes even fair portions seem too little, and soon words become heated. One declares that his bowl is light, lighter than it should be. The other retorts that his companion has counted poorly, that he always complains though he eats heartily. The others look on, some amused, others uneasy, for quarrels over food are no strangers to the road. Livingstone, hearing the commotion, sets aside his journal and steps closer, his face calm though his eyes sharp with concern. He understands well that hunger can carve sharper divisions than distance or fatigue. For a moment he says nothing, listening as the men repeat their claims, each voice rising like the crackle of fire before it bursts into flame. The donkey, tethered at the edge of the clearing, chooses this instant to bray loudly, stamping its hooves against the ground as if demanding attention. The sound is so sudden, so absurd in its timing, that a ripple of laughter escapes from one of the men seated by the fire. The quarrellers glance toward the animal, and in that pause Livingstone seizes the moment. He steps forward, takes the disputed bowl in his hands, and with a faint smile declares that if neither man can agree on the fairness of the share, then the wisest judge must decide. He lifts the bowl toward the donkey, whose ears flick and nose twitches as it sniffs the maize porridge. The camp erupts. Some men laugh so hard they double over, others clap their hands. One insists in mock solemnity that the donkey is indeed the only impartial creature among them. The two quarrellers, caught between pride and humour, cannot help but chuckle as the donkey nudges the bowl with its snout, spilling a little of the porridge onto the ground. One porter, still wiping tears of laughter, declares that the spirits have chosen their judge well, for the donkey eats without favour or prejudice. Another adds that should disputes continue, perhaps all food should be given to the donkey first, and the men may fight over the crumbs it leaves behind. Livingstone shakes his head, smiling despite himself. He retrieves the bowl before the animal makes a true meal of it and divides the contents carefully into two equal parts. He sets them before the quarrellers, whose anger has dissolved entirely into embarrassment. Each man accepts his portion with bowed head, grinning sheepishly, their voices soft as they thank him. The quarrel, once sharp enough to pierce the air, has been reduced to nothing more than a memory wrapped in laughter. Later, as the men eat, conversation turns toward the nature of value on the road. One of the older porters remarks that salt carried in a small pouch is worth more than gold in such a place, for without it food loses its savour and bodies weaken. Another nods, adding that a single gourd of milk offered by a villager can feel richer than any coin. Livingstone listens, noting the truth of their words, and writes in his journal that journeys are measured not in wealth but in endurance, and that the most precious possessions are often the simplest. The donkey, satisfied with its brief role as judge, settles back onto the ground, its head lowering, its ears drooping in drowsiness. From time to time, one of the men glances toward it and chuckles anew, as though remembering how easily a quarrel can be transformed into comedy when an animal interrupts with such perfect timing. The phrase, "let the donkey decide," begins to circulate, repeated with amusement whenever a question arises, whether about the best path to take or the fairness of a task. It becomes a phrase that lightens burdens, a reminder that sometimes laughter weighs less than anger, and that even stubborn creatures may serve as peacemakers. As night deepens, the bowls are emptied, and the fire glows steady. The camp hums with voices more relaxed than before. The two men who quarrelled sit side by side, their earlier dispute forgotten, now teasing each other with exaggerated claims about who nearly lost his dinner to the donkey's judgment. The others join in, embellishing the story already, turning it into a tale that will be retold in nights to come. Livingstone, pleased with the peace restored, writes again, his words noting that disputes often dissolve more easily with humour than with command, and that a circle of laughter around a fire is stronger than any chain. You sit with them, part of the circle, and feel how tension can transform. What was once sharp is now softened. What was once divided has become shared again. The warmth of porridge fills the belly, the warmth of laughter fills the heart, and together they form a comfort greater than either alone. The river hums faintly in the distance, the fire breathes steadily, and the camp drifts toward its nightly calm. If your own thoughts have been quarrelling, restless and insistent, you may let them follow the example of the porters. Imagine them handed to the donkey, judged with a nudge of the nose, divided fairly and dissolved into laughter. The night holds no grudges here. Close your eyes if you wish, and let the fire's glow assure you that peace has already been restored. The camp has grown quiet after laughter and quarrels, the donkey now fully at peace. The porters stretched across their mats, some murmuring still, but most drifting into drowsy silence. The fire is reduced to a bed of glowing coals, orange light seeping upward in slow pulses, as though the earth itself were breathing beneath the circle of stones. Above, the sky is opened wide and endless, its black canvas pricked by stars so numerous they seem almost to press downward, closer than one believes possible. In this atmosphere of calm, Livingstone sits apart, his journal once more resting across his knees, though he hesitates before writing. His thoughts have turned not to rivers or disputes or the humour of stubborn donkeys, but to the memory of a place far away, a home that lives more in mist than in light. He remembers Scotland, the land of his childhood, with a clarity that surprises him. In his mind's eye he sees the low hills rising into fog, their outlines softened as though drawn with a gentle hand. He recalls mornings when the mist clung to the ground, dampening every sound so that footsteps on the path to the mill seemed muffled, almost secret. He recalls the way roofs gleamed with moisture, droplets forming along the edges like strings of glass beads, and the way the river there, narrow and modest compared to the great African waters, carried with it a coldness that seemed to come from ancient stones. These details are so vivid that for a moment the clearing fades, replaced by a landscape of grey skies and heather, the smell of peat smoke rising from chimneys, the call of gulls wheeling above distant coasts. The contrast between that memory and the reality before him is stark yet tender. Here the stars are sharp, blazing with intensity, not hidden behind clouds but revealed in their full abundance. The air is dry, filled with the scent of grass and dust, not the damp earth of his homeland. Instead of mist softening the world, the night lays everything bare. The tall trees etched against the horizon, the shifting forms of porters beneath their blankets, the embers pulsing steady at the fire's heart. Where Scotland offered concealment, Africa offers exposure, as if nothing here can be hidden, not even the smallest fear or joy. Livingstone leans back, gazing upward, and allows himself a rare sigh. He speaks softly, not to the camp but to the night itself, remarking that every traveller carries two homes, one ahead, toward which his steps are always pointed, and one behind, carried like a shadow in memory. The men near the fire glance toward him, curious but not intruding, sensing that his words are not meant as lecture but as reflection. The boy who told stories of compasses and spirits props himself up on one elbow, listening with wide eyes, perhaps wondering what it means to hold two homes at once. You too may feel the truth of the thought, for even if you have not marched under African stars, you know what it is to carry a place inside you, a place you have left yet never lost. It lingers in scents, in sounds, in the sudden sharp recall of light falling across a certain kind of stone. It lingers in the way your chest tightens when memory presses forward, uninvited yet welcome all the same. The fire crackles softly, sparks drifting upward before vanishing into the immensity of the sky. Livingstone lifts his journal and writes with deliberate strokes, recording the contrast as though sketching two portraits side by side, one of Scottish mist, one of African starlight. He writes not to compare them as better or worse, but to preserve the tension between them, to remind himself that identity is stretched across distance, that belonging can be both here and there at once. His pencil pauses, then resumes, tracing the line of thought until it settles into words that he underlines for emphasis. A man carries two homes, one before and one behind. The porters murmur quietly among themselves, their voices blending with the night soundscape. Some tease the boy about his endless curiosity, others speak of their own villages, their own memories of home. One describes the scent of rain on freshly turned soil, another the laughter of children running between huts, another the taste of millet beer shared during harvest festivals. Their memories, spoken softly, weave into the circle like threads of many colours, different yet joined by the same longing. For though they walk together now, each man carries within him a place that shapes his dreams, a place waiting or remembered. The elder who told the river tale lifts his head and adds in his slow voice that home is not only a place, but a pattern of life. The way mornings unfold, the way songs are sung, the way fires are lit at dusk. He says that even if a man never returns, the pattern remains in him, guiding his steps as surely as any compass. Livingstone nods at this, recognising the wisdom, and notes it quietly in his book. The air cools as the night deepens, the wind shifting so that the smell of the river drifts closer, mingling with the smoke of the fire. The stars blaze overhead, mirrored faintly in the eyes of those still awake. The donkey shifts and snorts, the dogs stir, then all returns to calm. The camp seems wrapped not in mist but in memory itself, each man turning inward while remaining within the circle. For you, listening by the fire, the moment becomes a meditation. You feel both the pull of your own past and the presence of the now, as though you too carry two homes, one in memory, one in the journey ahead. It is not a burden but a comfort, proof that you are never rootless, never adrift. For even as you walk toward the unknown, you are followed by the gentle shadow of where you began. The fire's glow softens further, embers dimming, yet their warmth lingers. Livingstone closes his journal, resting it beside him, his expression calm, touched by the tenderness of his reflection. The porters settle again, blankets pulled close, voices fading. Silence grows, not empty, but full of all that has been remembered. If your eyelids lower now, let them. Imagine the mist of Scotland curling around hills, the blaze of African stars above a river, and yourself carried gently between them. One home behind, one home ahead, and you resting in the space between, safe in the circle of firelight. Night has folded itself thickly over the clearing, a blanket of shadow stitched with stars, and the campfire at its centre burns with a steady glow, its flames crackling softly as though whispering reassurance against the darkness beyond. The porters lie on their mats, some already drifting in and out of shallow sleep, others murmuring in low tones as they adjust their blankets, while the dogs doze with ears twitching at every rustle from the forest edge. It is a night like so many others on the road, marked by routine and quiet, until suddenly the stillness is broken by a sound that rolls through the air like thunder caught in a throat. A lion roars beyond the trees, deep and resonant, the kind of sound that is felt as much in the chest as in the ear. It begins low, swelling until it shakes the air, then falls away into silence that feels heavier than the roar itself. The fire pops in response, sending sparks upward, as though startled, while the donkey brays nervously, tugging at its tether with restless hooves. The porters stir, sitting upright, eyes wide in the dim glow. Another roar follows, closer this time, and the dogs leap to their feet, barking furiously into the dark. For a moment, the camp holds its breath. Livingstone, who has been writing by the fire, looks up and sets his journal aside, his face calm but alert. The younger porters whisper hurriedly, some making the sign of protection, others clutching at their blankets as though thin cloth could shield them from teeth and claws. One voice rises above the rest, the same boy whose tales and fears have already coloured so many nights. He declares with dramatic certainty that the lion's roar is no ordinary call, but the voice of spirits come to punish him for losing a blanket to their mischief. His words draw nervous laughter, quickly smothered by another roar that echoes through the trees nearer still. Livingstone rises slowly, stretching his shoulders as though the sound itself were no more than a summons to stand. He walks to the edge of the firelight, gazing into the dense blackness beyond, and then returns, speaking in a low, steady tone. He reminds the men that lions often patrol their territories, roaring not from hunger, but from habit, marking their presence with sound rather than attack. He recalls nights in Scotland when wolves howled across the hills, and how the cries seemed close enough to touch yet were miles away. The men listen, their fear easing slightly, though the firelight still dances on tense faces. The boy mutters again, clutching his blanket tightly, insisting that the spirits must be angry because they failed to share enough porridge with them the night before. His companion seize upon the remark instantly, teasing him that he should leave an offering of hardtack by the fire. One man declares that no spirit, lion or otherwise, would dare attempt such a meal, lest it break its teeth before the hunt. Laughter ripples through the circle, rising cautiously at first, then more freely until even the boy himself cannot help but grin despite his wide eyes. Another roar follows, distant now, fading as the animal moves further away, its voice lingering like an echo along the plain. The dogs, reassured, lower themselves to the ground once more, though their eyes remain fixed on the shadows. The donkey, still unsettled, snorts loudly and stamps, and someone mutters that perhaps it is the donkey's own spirit that frightens the lions, for no creature alive could endure such stubbornness without hesitation. The men laugh again, this time without restraint, the tension of moments ago dissolving like smoke into air. Livingstone resumes his seat, his journal forgotten for now. He leans back, listening to the laughter, nodding with satisfaction. He knows well that fear is not conquered by denial, but by transformation, by turning it into a story, a joke, a shared moment that binds men closer than danger can separate them. He watches as the men tease the boy, as they repeat the phrase "blanket spirits," until it becomes a kind of charm, a refrain that protects as surely as spears and fire. The fire crackles on, its flames rising and falling, and the forest edge settles once more into quiet. The porters gradually lie back down, some still chuckling, others whispering prayers, all eased by the shared laughter. The boy, clutching his blanket, finally stretches out with a defiant sigh, muttering that if the spirits want it, they must take it from him while he sleeps. His companions grin, promising to watch and report if the spirits dare. You, seated quietly among them, feel the power of the moment. What began as a tremor of fear has become warmth. What began as the roar of danger has become part of the night's story. You imagine the lion pacing in the distance, its silhouette moving between trees, its mane catching moonlight as it lifts its head to roar again, not as a threat, but as a reminder that this land is wide, shared between creatures of many kinds. The campfire glows steadily against that vastness, a fragile yet enduring centre of light. The air smells of smoke and damp grass, of leather and sweat, of the faint musk of animals near and far. Above, the stars burn with sharp clarity, unbothered by the dramas below. The night has deepened, yet with each breath you feel calmer, steadier, lulled by the rhythm of fire, laughter, and distant roars. If your eyes grow heavy now, you may let them close. Imagine the lion's silhouette fading into the trees. Imagine the blanket spirits chuckling harmlessly among themselves. Imagine the fire glowing warm against the dark. The night will keep its watch, and the circle of companionship will hold strong until dawn. The night has not ended yet, though it feels as though a new chapter has already begun. The fire burns lower, its glow reduced to a warm heart pulsing in the clearing, while the voices of the men grow quieter, replaced by the steady rhythm of the river flowing nearby. The water has been their companion for hours, its sound threading through the silence, promising both sustenance and challenge. Tonight, it is not enough simply to camp by its edge. Tonight, they must cross. The moon rides high, silvering the surface of the river until it looks less like water than like a sheet of metal laid across the earth. Ripples catch the light, creating shifting patterns that glimmer and fade so that each moment seems written anew. The air is cooler by the water, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and reeds, tinged with the musk of unseen creatures moving along the bank. The men stand quietly at the edge, their loads balanced, their shadows stretching, long behind them in the moonlight. Livingstone steps forward, his boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. He gazes across the water, measuring not only its width, but its temperament. The current is steady, not fierce, yet strong enough to tug at a canoe if handled carelessly. He speaks softly, his words carried more by gesture than volume, instructing the porters to ready the canoes. These vessels, hollowed from single trunks of trees, rest half submerged at the bank, their surfaces glistening with dew. Each is narrow, just wide enough for a few men and their burdens, and carved smooth so that they seem like extensions of the river itself. The porters move with practiced care, lifting bundles onto the bottom of the boats, adjusting their balance so that nothing tips too far to one side. The donkey, as expected, resists entirely, braying loudly and planting its hooves in the mud. Laughter rises quietly, easing the tension, as two men coax and push until the animal finally agrees to step into the shallow water, though still refusing the canoe. Livingstone shakes his head with a smile, remarking that the donkey has clearly decided it was born to remain on solid ground. Eventually they settle for tethering it to wait until morning, a compromise that pleases no one more than the beast itself. One by one the men climb into the canoes. The wood creaks under their weight, shifting slightly with the pull of the current. Poles are lifted, pressed into the riverbed, and with a steady push the boats drift away from shore. The sound is immediate. The gentle slap of water against the hollow trunks, the occasional splash as a pole slips deeper, the creak of wood adjusting to motion. Above it all, the silence of the night presses close, broken only by the calls of night birds and the distant croak of frogs. The river seems wider once they are upon it, the banks retreating behind, the opposite shore a shadow that refuses to draw closer. The men paddle in unison, their strokes catching the moonlight, droplets falling back into the current like beads of silver. Livingstone sits at the front of one canoe, his eyes scanning the surface, his ears tuned to every shift in the current. He has crossed many such rivers, yet each feels like its own test, a reminder that water is both path and peril, For you, drifting with them, the sensation is dreamlike. The canoe glides smoothly, yet you can feel the slight tug of the current beneath, a pull that whispers of depths unseen. The moon reflects upon the water, so bright it feels as though you are sliding across light itself, a silver road laid out just for this passage. The air is damp and cool against your face, carrying the scent of reeds crushed by the poles, the faint sweetness of blossoms hidden among the river banks. Every sense is heightened, sharpened by the contrast between the stillness of the sky and the movement of the river. Halfway across, a fish leaps suddenly, breaking the surface with a splash that sends ripples racing outward. The men pause, glancing at one another, some smiling, some whispering about spirits that test the crossing. The boy who so often gives voice to fears and fancies mutters that perhaps the river woman from the elder's tale has stirred beneath them, curious about the newcomers. His words draw soft laughter, the tension easing as quickly as it rose. Livingstone chuckles quietly, remarking that even fish seem to enjoy startling travellers, and urges the men to continue their steady rhythm. The opposite bank grows nearer at last, its line of trees dark against the lighter sky. The men paddle harder, eager now, their movements synchronized, each stroke bringing the canoe closer to solid ground. When at last the hull grinds gently against the shore, relief ripples through the group. They step out carefully, boots sinking into wet soil, and begin unloading bundles. The wood of the canoes groans as they are pulled onto the bank, water dripping in slow trails back into the current. The porters sigh, some shaking their arms to loosen the ache of paddling, others stretching their backs. The donkey brays faintly from across the river, a reminder that one crossing still remains for the morning. The men laugh, declaring that the animal has chosen wisely, for it will wake to sunlight before stepping into the water. Livingstone smiles at the remark, noting that sometimes stubbornness is simply another form of patience. Once the camp is arranged again on the new bank, the fire coaxed into life, and mats spread across the earth, the men sit together in quiet reflection. The river's sound is softer here, its voice less insistent, as though satisfied that its challenge has been met. Livingstone writes in his journal, recording not only the crossing, but the balance of fear and humour that accompanied it. He writes that rivers are both fear and promise, obstacles and guides, and that to cross them is to place trust not only in wood and water, but in one another. You, sitting within the circle once more, feel the truth of those words. The river remains behind, yet its presence lingers, like a pulse that beats beyond hearing. You remember the silver path of moonlight, the leap of the fish, the laughter that rose from tension, and you realise that such crossings are not merely distances covered, but experiences carried forward. If your eyes are heavy now, you may let them close. Imagine the canoe gliding once more across silver water. Imagine the moon painting a road just for you. Imagine yourself carried safely to shore. The river hums on, but you're already across, already resting, already safe within the circle of firelight. The air before a storm is never silent. It hums with the tension that the body feels before the mind names it. The men sense it first in the way the leaves turn upward, showing their pale undersides to the sky, and in the way the dogs grow restless, circling and whining as though their paws could already feel the rain. The campfire burns unevenly, its flames swaying in a wind that had not been there moments before, and the air carries the scent of ozone, sharp and metallic, promising lightning. Livingstone sits near the fire, writing quickly, trying to finish a line before the first drop falls. The porters move faster now, tightening ropes around the patched tents, lowering their bundles from the donkey, pulling canvas over baskets of food. The donkey itself brays with indignation, as if offended by the sky, stamping its hooves in the mud that has already begun to soften beneath a few scattered drops. The men laugh at its protests, though their eyes flick anxiously toward the horizon where clouds gather like armies. Then the storm breaks. Rain comes not in hesitant drops, but in a sudden rush. A sheet of water that slaps against the tents, hisses in the fire, and soaks clothing in an instant. The wind follows, tearing at the canvas, bending branches, filling the clearing with a roar that competes with thunder. The fire sputters and fights for survival, flames shrinking into stubborn sparks, while the porters huddle beneath what shelter they can manage. Lightning splits the sky, jagged and blinding, illuminating the camp for an instant in stark white light. Every figure is frozen in that flash, the donkey rearing slightly, the dogs crouched low, the men bent against the wind. Then darkness returns, deeper for the brightness that came before. Thunder crashes, rolling across the plain, making the very ground tremble. Amid the chaos, a lantern swings wildly, its flame guttering before vanishing into smoke. A cry rises above the storm, the boy's voice trembling yet loud. "The spirits have taken the light!" His words spark both fear and laughter. Another porter, dripping and miserable, shouts back that the spirits must be greedy indeed, stealing lanterns as well as blankets. The joke spreads even as water runs down their faces, laughter mingling with rain, cutting through the storm's violence. The boy insists that the spirits are determined to leave him with nothing, not even a dry corner of his mat. He clutches his blanket tightly, now soaked through, declaring with exaggerated despair that the ghosts have stolen its last breath of warmth. The others, despite the discomfort, burst into loud laughter, some doubling over the water pours from their hair and sleeves. Even Livingstone cannot resist a smile, shaking his head as he helps adjust a sagging tent, remarking that the only spirit here is the storm itself, wild but fleeting. Rain lashes on, drumming against canvas, slapping into puddles that spread quickly across the clearing. The men work with determination, digging small channels with sticks to guide the water away from their mats, reinforcing poles that threaten to collapse. Each task is accompanied by a joke or complaint, one man muttering that the storm must be washing their sins clean, another grumbling that if the spirits wish to punish them, they might at least have chosen to do so on a warmer night. The donkey shakes itself violently, spraying water onto anyone nearby, and is rewarded with curses shouted half in frustration, half in amusement. One porter suggests they appoint the donkey as guardian of the storm, since no rain seems able to soften its stubbornness. The dogs bark, chasing shadows created by lightning, their voices echoing against thunder, until it seems as though the storm itself has joined the camp's chorus. Through it all, the fire clings to life. Though beaten by rain, though hissed into near extinction, a core of embers glows stubbornly beneath the wet wood. Livingstone crouches low, shielding it with his body as he adds small sticks, coaxing it back to flame. At last, with a spark that flares into orange light, the fire revives, weak but steady, and cheers rise louder than the thunder. The men gather close, dripping and shivering, yet warmed by the sight of flame that has survived against all odds. The storm rages on, but its violence begins to lose its edge. The first fury of wind softens into steady gusts. The rain lessens from torrent to downpour. The thunder grows less frequent. The porters, exhausted from laughter and labour alike, begin to settle, pulling blankets around themselves even though they are damp, leaning against one another for warmth. The boy, still clinging to his soaked blanket, mutters once more that the spirits have robbed him of every comfort, but his grin betrays him. The phrase sparks fresh chuckles, though softer now, mingled with yawns. Livingstone writes a final note in his journal before the rain forces him to close it. He records the storm not only as weather but as experience, the way fear gave way to humour, the way a lantern's extinguishing became a ghost story, the way laughter echoed even in the roar of thunder. He remarks that survival is not only a matter of endurance but of spirit. of the ability to find warmth in one another when the fire falters. The rain continues to fall, gentler now, tapping softly against canvas and leaves. The fire glows more confidently, the embers no longer smothered, and the camp slowly drifts into a calm shaped by exhaustion. The storm has not passed entirely, but its heart has moved on, leaving only its voice in the distance. You, seated within the circle, feel the calm seep back into your bones. The storm has spent its strength, leaving behind clean air, damp earth, and a sense of relief that tastes almost sweet. If your eyes are heavy, let them close. Imagine the rain tapping softly above you, the embers glowing, the laughter still echoing in memory. The spirits may take blankets and lanterns, but they cannot steal the warmth of companionship that remains. The storm has passed, though its memory clings to the camp in the smell of damp canvas, the weight of soaked blankets, and the puddles that reflect the firelight like fragments of shattered mirrors. The air is transformed, washed clean, sharp with the freshness that only follows rain, as though the earth itself has exhaled and settled into peace. Drops fall steadily from branches, tapping onto leaves and mats, a rhythm softer than the thunder that once shook the ground. For the first time in hours, the night seems still, a calm so complete it almost hums. The porters sit scattered around the fire, their shoulders slumped with exhaustion, their hair and clothes clinging wetly to their bodies. Yet their faces glow faintly in the fire's reborn light, not with misery but with relief. Some chuckle softly at the memory of the donkey shaking itself like a storm spirit, spraying water onto anyone unlucky enough to stand close. Others tease the boy again, insisting that if ghosts had stolen his blanket once more, at least they had been kind enough to leave him drenched proof. He groans theatrically, clutching the sodden fabric, but his grin is visible in the firelight. The quarrel and tension of the storm have dissolved into this shared quiet, where laughter and fatigue mingle easily. Livingstone, seated close to the embers, holds his journal but does not yet open it. Instead he listens, letting the silence stretch, his gaze wandering to the sky. The clouds, once swollen and violent, are breaking apart now, drifting like torn sails across a dark sea. Between them stars begin to appear, first a handful, then dozens, then countless, until the heavens gleam with renewed brilliance. The moon emerges too, pale and luminous, casting its reflection across the wet earth. The light softens everything it touches, turning puddles into silver pools, making the torn edges of canvas gleam as though gilded. The dogs lie stretched on the ground, their earlier frenzy gone, ears twitching at distant sounds but bodies relaxed. The donkey chews methodically at damp grass, unconcerned, as if it had never brayed at lightning or resisted the wind's fury. The porters, one by one, sink lower into their mats, their murmurs fading into sighs. The storm has emptied them of energy, leaving behind a stillness so profound it feels almost sacred. You breathe with the camp now, inhaling the scent of rain on earth, exhaling into the rhythm of dripping leaves. The world is hushed, as though the storm has pressed pause on every noise but these. The drip, the crackle of low fire, the occasional deep sigh of a man sinking into rest. You may imagine yourself inside one of the patched tents, lying on a mat that still holds a trace of warmth from the day, listening to the gentle patter above. The drops strike canvas in uneven rhythm, like fingers drumming a lullaby on hollow wood. Livingstone finally opens his journal, though his pencil moves more slowly than before. He writes not of distances or discoveries, but of the way storms strip life to its essentials: water, fire, companionship. He notes how quickly fear can turn to laughter, how laughter can fade into silence, and how silence itself can feel as nourishing as food. He writes of the stars returning after clouds, how they appear brighter for their absence, how the men lifted their eyes toward them as if reassured by their persistence. He underlines one phrase before closing the book. After every storm, stillness is a gift. One of the older porters, not yet asleep, hums a fragment of song, not loud enough to gather the others, but clear enough to reach the fire. It is a melody without words, drifting like mist, fading and reappearing, soft as breath. This sound blends with the dripping water until it seems as though the earth itself is humming along. The man leans back, eyes closing, his hum dissolving into steady sleep. The camp is wrapped now in a kind of hush that feels larger than the clearing. Beyond the circle, the forest too seems quieter, as if the storm has subdued every living thing. No lions roar, no hyenas laugh, no frogs call. Even the river sounds softened, its constant voice muted by the blanket of rain still flowing into its depths. It is as if the world itself, after a fit of anger, has chosen to rest. You may imagine yourself lying among them, blanket damp but body warm enough, listening to the quiet. The storm has passed, and with it the weight of tension. What remains is a peace that feels more complete for the chaos that came before. Close your eyes, and you can still see lightning, hear thunder, feel rain on your face, but only as memory, like the echo of a dream already fading. What surrounds you now is gentleness. Fires glow, dripping leaves, moonlight on silver puddles. Livingstone lies back too, resting his journal at his side, his hands folded loosely on his chest, his breathing evens, his face calm, softened by fatigue and reflection. The men's voices are gone now, replaced by the deep rhythmic sound of sleep. The fire lowers itself further, embers glowing like watchful eyes, steady and unblinking. The donkey shifts once, sighs, then settles again. The camp has surrendered fully to rest. If your own thoughts have been turbulent, let them follow the path of the storm, loud, messy, relentless at first, but always ending in quiet. Imagine the rain washing them away. Imagine the stars returning after their absence. Imagine yourself lying safely under canvas, listening to water drip like a lullaby. Stillness is the gift left behind, and it belongs to you now. The night has grown old, though it shows no sign of wear. Stars glimmer still with the same clarity they had hours ago. The moon drifts steady in its path, and the trees sway gently in the night air as though keeping a vigil of their own. Yet within the camp, the sense of ending is undeniable. The fire that once roared with vitality is now reduced to a shallow glow, its embers pulsing with slow breaths, its flames little more than delicate tongues flickering now and then before vanishing. The circle that had been filled with voices, laughter, and quarrels is hushed, the men lying in stillness, their forms shadowed beneath blankets, their faces softened by sleep. Livingstone sits near the fire, his journal open but untouched. His pencil rests loosely in his hand, as though it too has grown weary of recording, and his gaze is fixed not on the page but on the embers themselves. They fascinate him, these remnants of flame, glowing with a beauty that belongs entirely to endings. He watches how they shift and collapse inward, sparks rising like fleeting souls, vanishing as quickly as they appear. Each spark feels like a thought, a memory, a story told and released into the night. The silence of the camp is not heavy, but serene. The dogs lie curled with their noses tucked under tails, their ears twitching only when a distant owl calls. The donkey, the great source of both frustration and humour, lies quietly too, its chest rising and falling with steady breath, as though even stubbornness must rest eventually. The porters sleep deeply after long days and longer nights, their shoulders no longer tense, their brows smoothed by dreams. In their rest they resemble children more than labourers, softened by sleep into the truest image of peace. Livingstone leans forward, stirring the embers with a stick. The sparks leap upward, painting brief constellations before fading. He thinks of the many nights before this one, of the storms endured, the quarrels resolved, the laughter that warmed the circle, and the stories that carried them into wonder. He thinks too of the lions whose roars turned into part of the lullaby, of the songs under moonlight that made even the donkey's restlessness seem calm, of the river crossings that tested courage yet ended in laughter. Each memory rises in him like one of the sparks, bright, brief, and then absorbed into the larger night. He closes his eyes briefly, recalling home once more, Scotland's mist, the dampness of mornings when breath lingered like fog, the smell of peat smoke from chimneys. He contrasts it with the African night around him, vast and dry, filled not with mist but with clarity, stars cutting the sky into patterns that seem eternal. His heart holds both landscapes at once, the home behind him and the home he builds each night with fire and companions. He murmurs quietly, almost inaudibly, that words written on pages may fade, but the stars remain, unchanged above both lands, constant across time. The boy who so often filled the nights with his chatter stirs in his sleep, muttering something about spirits once more. One of the older porters, half awake, chuckles softly and whispers that even in dreams the boy argues with ghosts. The moment draws a ripple of warmth through the camp, a final echo of the humour that has threaded the journey. Livingstone smiles at it, grateful that the running joke about spirits and stolen blankets has become not only laughter, but a kind of charm that carried the men through fear. The embers glow lower, sinking into ash, their light still strong enough to paint the underside of the trees in faint orange. The air is cool, but no longer biting, softened by the storm's passing, fresh and sweet with the scent of damp earth. You sit quietly among them, feeling as though you are part of the circle even in silence. The night does not demand words, only presence, and presence is enough. Livingstone at last closes his journal, not because there is nothing more to say, but because the moment itself is complete without recording. He places the book gently beside him, folds his hands and gazes into the fire's dying glow. His expression is calm, touched by fatigue yet softened by contentment. He knows that the journey will continue tomorrow, with all its challenges and discoveries, but tonight belongs only to this circle, this fire, this silence. The camp breathes together, one body resting, one man watching, one fire glowing. Above, the stars shine with patient light, and the moon drifts onward, its reflection caught in small puddles left by the rain. The river hums faintly, a quiet accompaniment, steady and eternal. Nothing more is needed, nothing more is asked. If your own thoughts are restless, let them settle as these embers settle. Imagine them as sparks rising briefly and fading, leaving behind only warmth. Imagine yourself seated by the fire, watching as the glow sinks into ash, knowing that endings are gentle when they arrive in their own time. You may close your eyes and rest, carried by the same stillness that holds the camp, by the same stars that have watched every traveller before and will watch every traveller after. The night has reached its deepest hour, the point where time itself feels almost suspended. The fire has burned down to its smallest glow, a quiet shimmer of ash and coal that no longer crackles but hums faintly with hidden heat. Around it, the porters sleep in steady rhythms, their breath rising and falling like the slow tide of an unseen sea. Blankets lie heavy across their bodies, damp in patches yet still offering comfort, and their faces are softened by the surrender of dreams. The dogs, once restless, curl in complete trust, their noses tucked beneath tails, ears at rest. Even the donkey stand quiet, its silhouette faint against the silver light of the moon, no longer braying its discontent, simply existing as one more figure absorbed into the hush. The elder, the boy, the strong porters, the companions who fill the days with voices and the nights with laughter, all are silent now, carried away into sleep. The forest, too, seems to have stilled. No lions roar tonight. No sudden crack of branches disturbs the air. Instead, the soundscape is composed of the smallest details. The distant hum of insects, the faint tap of water still dripping from leaves after the storm, and the low rush of the river moving steadily beyond the trees. Occasionally a drum beat carries faintly from a distant village, no louder than a heartbeat, a reminder that beyond the campfire's circle other fires still burn, other songs still rise. But here, in this clearing, only softness remains. Livingstone lies back now, his journal closed for the night, his pencil set aside. His face is turned toward the stars, eyes half open, though their light seems more dream than sight. He breathes slowly, evenly, as though attuned to the same rhythm as the earth around him. His thoughts drift, not to maps or discoveries, not to the demands of travel, but to the simple grace of being present. In this moment, nothing is required of him but rest. He allows himself that rare gift, letting the weight of the day slip gently from his shoulders. You sit within this quiet, and the hush wraps around you as if it were meant entirely for you. The last ember of fire glows like a small heart, beating softly against the darkness. The sky above is vast, jewelled with stars, but they do not overwhelm, they comfort. They remind you that you are part of something endless, and yet protected in this circle of light and shadow. The river's voice, low and steady, becomes a lullaby, its endless current like a hand smoothing back hair, assuring you of continuity, of safety. Every sound is softened now, as though the world itself has lowered its voice for fear of waking those who sleep. Even your own thoughts grow quieter, their edges rounded, their urgency fading. You feel them drifting away like sparks rising into the night air, fading into stars, leaving you lighter, emptier, ready for rest. The porters shift occasionally, one turning onto his side, another murmuring softly in dream, but even these small sounds serve only to deepen the sense of peace. The boy, who had filled so many nights with chatter of spirits, is silent at last, his blanket wrapped firmly around him, safe from both rain and ghostly mischief. The elder breathes deeply, his chest rising and falling like a steady drum. The donkey sighs once, then falls silent again. The world has joined in slumber. You too are invited now to let go. Imagine yourself lying beneath the canvas of the tent, the faint smell of damp cloth around you, the distant drip of water from leaves falling in slow rhythm, the whisper of the river beyond. Imagine the stars above, unseen but known, steady and eternal, their light brushing across the land as softly as breath. Imagine the warmth of companionship, even in silence, the knowledge that the camp keeps watch, that fire, though small, still glows, that you're not alone. Livingstone closes his eyes fully now, surrendering to the same rest that has claimed his companions. His journal lies beside him, filled with notes of rivers, storms, laughter, quarrels, songs, and silence. His words will remain, but the night moves forward, as it always does, indifferent whether they are written or forgotten. Yet that is the beauty of it. The stars above are the same that watched over his journey centuries ago, and they are the same that watch over you now. Time folds gently here, collapsing distance, joining the traveller of the past with the dreamer of the present. The hush grows deeper still. The insects hum like distant violins. The river murmurs its endless song. The air cools and holds you like a blanket. You feel yourself becoming part of the night, no longer separate but folded into its rhythm. Sleep is not a demand but an invitation, offered again and again until you are ready to accept. If your eyes are heavy, let them close. If your thoughts still wander, let them wander without resistance, for even wandering thoughts are safe here. You may drift as the river drifts, slowly, inevitably, carrying you into dreams. Close your eyes now. The camp will keep watch. The embers will glow until dawn. The stars will shine until morning, and you're free to rest as long as you need.